3 Tracts. Of the great medicine of philosophers for humane and metalline bodies. 1. Entitled Ars Metallorum Metamorphosios. 2. Brevis Manuductio ad Rubinum Coelestem. 3. Fons Chemicae Philosophiae, all written in Latin by Eirenaeus Philalethes Cosmopolita, translated into English for the benefit of the studious, by a lover of art and them. London, printed 1694. The publisher's preface to the reader. Reader, being conversant for many years with writings of this kind, and also with not a few persons in pursuit of the mastery, who together with me have not only read the true and false, books with equal credit, by which thou may judge of the event in practice, but also have embraced the notions or practice of confident affirmers with suitable credit to the hopes of attaining. This labyrinth having no more possession of me, and the theory of principles so far prevailing as to enable me to make choice of authors and persons, to converse with, can do no less than contribute as much as in me lies to the help of those ingenious searchers under the same difficulty. In order to effect this, I have already communicated a short but candid tract not long since, which was communicated to me by my very good friend, as may be seen in his kind letter, in which it was enclosed and printed with it, called Philadelphia, which one think in no ways falls short of the title. This one thought might have terminated my care of that kind, contenting myself that every one, though perhaps more capable, had not borne a proportion, but receiving this second kindness from my friend, wherein he freely communicates his thoughts, according to his promise and my request, which one persuaded myself could not but prove of advantage to the searchers of art, especially in their beginnings. And let it not be an objection that he does not assume the title of a possessor, but rather an argument of his sincerity, since I believe it possible that something may be gained from such early thoughts which more ripe experience denies. One meet with confirmation in this from a great master, viz. Eirenaeus Philalethes, in his preface to his expositions on Ripley's compound of alchemy, where speaking of the benefit he had received from authors, has this expression, "Some in good sooth, who are not professors of this secret, write more edifyingly to the informing of a tyro than those whom skill bath made crafty. However least, this should not be sufficient to recompense thy expense. One have added 3 excellent tracts, which one received from the hands of a friend that had taken some pains and care in their translation from the Latin copies printed in Holland, and one take this opportunity the rather, because the first of them is so highly commended by my friend. This is entitled Ars Metallorum Ainsi, which indeed well answers the end. Here the 4 billion studious may meet with help, the ignorant with light and information and reproaches and misochimics with demonstration beyond dispute. The second Brevis Manuductio, Onc, in which not only the field in which it lies and the reason of its epithet, but the means to attain it, is also shadowed forth. And indeed there are some peculiar hints that are not common. The third Forts Chemicae, Ansi, as this answers the title, so no doubt it will the desire of searchers. For as nothing is more needful, so nothing is more earnestly sought than the true fountain, bath, or menstruum in which soul is dissolved and amended. Thus, reader, having performed this in good will to the studious, give me leave to withdraw, and spend my time more privately, and do thou endeavour to bear a proportion with me in communicating, rather than carp, at what perhaps thou cannot imitate. However, since one seek no honour from thee, I shall be safe from the contrary. By remaining Philalethes, lying under the promise in my last, in which I sent Philadelphia, according to thy earnest request, that I would communicate my thoughts concerning the secret art of Hermes, and finding that little tract so generously communicated to the world, hastens the fulfilling it. But in the first place let me premise that as these are my thoughts and conceptions, let them merit no other ways than such, always, preferring the writings of known masters to all, and no farther than these agree with them, and by them are confirmed trust or embrace them. Having observed in my converse with those studious in this art that not one amongst many were possessed with so much as the theory of the possibility of it, though of many years' consideration, it was a motive to me to consider things radically, especially remembering the saying of philosophers, that it was never found of any by chance. And in the first place, the possibility of the thing, whence I might be assured that it was, nor that only, but that it was sufficient to recompense the time, cost, and labour necessary to it. I therefore, after many errors, betook myself to the most valued and candid authors treating of the theory and 6 billions possibility of the thing, such as were recommended by those certainly knowing, as Trevisan's 4 books, A and C, Sendivogius, and many more. But one small piece fell into my hands of greatest value, which I think fit to mention. It was entitled Ars Metallorum A and C, written by Eirenaeus Philalethes, this fully manifesting the possibility and worth of the art in a style not ambiguous but full of learning and demonstration, which was confirmed by all but by none more than Philadelphia. Thus prosecuting this effectually, I found it not very difficult to conceive the possibility of such an exaltation of imperfect bodies to perfection, seeing that no essential difference was between them but only accidental, and that all had one and the same matter, which is easily known to be mercurial, and that nature's design or end was, if she could have worked free from accidents, to have brought all to perfection. Therefore it will easily be granted and gathered from hence, that if a plusquam perfection of tincture endued with fixity and penetrability could be attained of the same nature, these imperfect bodies, so much of them as is mercurial, says Philadelphia, might be influenced and ennobled to the perfection of gold, whose perfection is the standard, so that as much as any body shall exceed in tincture this standard, so much it is capable of communicating to those short of it. Vide Philadelphia, or encore. So that we are not to think this transmutation of metals is a changing of one species into another, as those who conceive metals differ after that manner object, neither anything contrary to nature, but only changing of the same aureous matter from the state of crudity to the state of maturity, in nature's own way. I could give examples in nature of this, but seeing it is plentifully shown by masters of the art themselves, it ought to suffice. And for the possibility of multiplying this tincture, it is plentifully shown by many at WA, which some carp, neither is it hard to conceive, since our experience shows in common ferments, there is no end, as it were, of the power of ferment, as it comes to have reiterated operations on suitable matters. These considerations leads immediately, through a necessity, to abandon all thoughts of agents and patients out of kind, or that are not homogeneal to the bodies to be, mended, and one to another, this no small security to a young searcher against the many pretences and practices of those who prosecute those things blindly and corruptly. How this may be effected is indeed worth inquiry. Therefore let us consider that next. Nature being arrived at her end in the perfection of gold the standard, and fallen short of it in imperfect metals through accidents, we, to perfect them, must go as near to perfection as we can to begin, and as philosophers say, where nature left. If therefore we hope to move this perfection to a plusquam perfection, the perfection must die. Our great care then must be to seek and find such an agent that is capable to effect it, which appears to be, from all candid authors, and reason itself an homogeneous humid, which doth not only kill the body but dies with it, and are both raised far more noble and perfect, endued with a multiplicative power. Like as a grain of corn, when by its own humidity, in a proper matrix, is thus killed and raised, it putteth forth many grains, each endued with the same multiplicative virtue with the first seed, which may be multiplied, as it were, infinitely. This humidity, I very well know, is the desire of all true searchers of art, who know by sad experience how difficultly it is obtained, but how difficult soever it may be thought, or found to be, it must be attained, or we labour without reward. To reincrudate necessarily requires a crudity, and as this is to die, rise and dwell with the body reduced, must also through necessity be the same in kind, and only differ with respect to crudity, which then will naturally follow to be that crude out of which perfect gold is produced, according to all candid writers. Philadelphia has illustrated, and Bernard Trevisan with others has affirmed that mercury to metals is like common water to vegetables, viz., their matter. Therefore the crudest mercury must be the only agent to reincrudate ripe mercurial bodies. I have observed a pretty likeness between mercury in metallic works and water in vegetables. For if I would produce a vegetable, it must be by seed and water; if a metal, it must be by mercury and its ferment. If I would purify a vegetable body, which is water congealed, as sugar, salt, and sea, which are capable of being mixed with extraneous earth or feces, I must dissolve it in water, which water being of the unity of its matter possesses it, and rejects the feces, which being evaporated leave the body free from those impurities. Just so, in refining metals, which are mercury coagulated, we dissolve them in a sufficient quantity of mercurial matter, by fusion then evaporate the crude mercurial matter on a test and see, and the pure metal remains behind. In this work of refining running mercury is not chose or used, but corporeal, as in lunar Saturn is chose, and in Sol antimony. Silver being less perfect is purified by lead, less crude. Gold, most perfect, is purified by antimony, most crude, and as antimony is too crude for silver, so is lead not crude enough for gold. From hence may be learned the reason and ground of the refiner's art. And further, to manifest the difference in maturity between lead and antimony, I have observed in the union of them with other metals this different effect. When in the reduction of lead ore we add iron, and what else may be requisite, and a fusion of both is made, the metal that resides is malleable. But if the like be done with antimony, we find, instead of that, a brittle metalline mass. The reason of adding iron in such works is from hence the mercuriality or metalline part in the ore is held in chains by the abundance of impure sulphur, which violently attracts to itself the metallic sulphur in the iron, through which union the accidents in great measure are thrown off, and the metal resides in the bottom. Also we see that when some ripe metal is mixed with a greater quantity of crudity or immature, the immature is blown off, and the ripe remains. But if the crude too much exceed the ripe, it will carry that also, whence it is easy to err in quantities and degrees of fire. For if a small quantity of silver be mixed with a great quantity of antimony, and that hastily blown off, how easily do this crudity conquer and carry off the ripe body! This by the by. But to return to that which is sooner spoke than done, viz., the reduction of a perfect body by a crude agent, and as this is no doubt the end of our labour, so we shall find it attended with many difficulties. First in finding the extremes, then in uniting them, which must be through mediums, and perhaps in purification, for crudity is generally attended with impurity, and every perfect generation and union requires purity in the principles. The mediums of union ought to be adapted to the nature of the extremes, lest they should alienate rather than unite. Also mediums imply middle natures, that are not so crude as the one, nor so ripe as the other. Now astrologers say that Mercury is altered according to what planet he is joined in aspect, and is a conveyor of the influences and virtue of one to another. For through his open and easy nature he is fit to receive, and through his swiftness fit to communicate. But it is common in embassies that the messenger often returns before a true reconciliation be made between disagreeing powers. If it be so, we must take a proper time to employ Mercury when he is in conjunction with a fiery planet and dragon's tail, or Venus, for then he will have heat and feminine virtue mixed with his own moist nature, which I conceive to be making of the water that is cold, warm, as Philadelphia admonisheth. Thus Mercury seems to be the only medium for this work. But, worthy friend, I would impart one consideration more, that there is a great distance between the knowledge of principles and accomplishment of the work, yea, the first work, and then how much more the rest, both in respect to opportunity and success. For as our proverb has it, how many accidents happen between the cup and the lip, so also how many things intervene the seed time and harvest to cause a disappointment to the careful labourer. How many blasts and accidents after a fair bloom. Therefore the difficulties that attend so long, so secret and nice a work who can number. Let us therefore take care to be provided with a due theory of practice, as well as principles ere we 13a begin to move, lest we return without recompense. I am not ignorant that the practice is diversely conceived by searchers as well as principles, for the philosophers having spoken allusively of both, we may easily mistake. But I am obliged by the necessity of it to believe the principles were the same to all true philosophers, neither can I admit, for the same reason, of any other thoughts of their operations. I remember a saying in Ars Metallorum very confirming, where he speaks of the certainty of the art from argument, and amongst others brings this as none of the least. This at least is clear, that it is so far from being a new device, that there have been men skilful in it through many series of ages, who being different both in tongue and nation, and very many of them contemporary, have written so agreeingly of the art, that they cannot be proved by such as understand them either to corrupt, or diversely to handle so much as one operation. This perhaps may seem strange at first, as it did to me, being prepossessed with a conceit of the contrary, viz., that their seeming contradictions were owing to their different working on divers principles. But considering the thing, I found that he said not this alone, but that all admonish that we should observe wherein they all agree, and there was the truth. This admits that they do all agree, and consequently the same principles and practice, or it could not be so. Therefore, resolving to make an essay, I deeply weighed their sayings, prosecuted them one by one, observed their explication one of another, and at length perceived a harmony beyond compare, most secretly couched in their writings, yea, in those I before thought most differing, though not indeed without tropes, allegories, and figures are these things expressed, to conceal them from the vulgar. In short, therefore, let us not, like the alchemists of Sendivogius, propose to accomplish the thing by mercury alone or sulphur alone, but let both be the subjects of our contemplation and practice. For if I conceive aright, the matter of this most secret mastery is a sulphureous mercury, and the stone itself nothing else but that coagulated, which then is a mercurial sulphureity, penetrating, tinging, and fixing. Admit of my short conceptions, but believe, this is not obtained without the propitious smiles of Diana, who, parting from the conjunction of the sun, appears horned, the earth interposing, and Venus orient, who foreruns the sun, and proclaims the joyful day approaching. Of the beginning of the art, its writers, and its foundation, in which it is treated of the metallic principles and the gradual production of metals and minerals. Hermes, by surname Trismegistus, the father of this art, is introduced into the scene of philosophers, of whom various opinions of authors are reported. Who he should be, there are not wanting who affirm him to have been Moses. At least they agree in this, that he was an Egyptian, also a most quick-sighted philosopher. He is called the father of this philosophy, to wit, who first of all, whose books are extant, handled this philosophy. Yet some will have this science derived from Enoch, who, foreseeing the flood, writ the 7 liberal sciences, amongst which is chemistry, upon tables, and left them to posterity. 27, but Hermes entering into the valley of Hebron found them, which are yet called the Emerald Pillars, and thence learned his wisdom. Others sharply contend that Noah knew this art, and carried it into his ark. Not a few do endeavour to establish this art from some places of Scripture, and write that Solomon had it. Some bring it down from Adam himself, to Abel, and so to Seth, but such like subtleties do not please me. Being about to write the simplicity of nature, they do not illustrate, nay rather obscure art, that it seems enthusiastical, and they that so write do nothing else but yield an occasion of deriding to misochimics. For that, if the art has a real foundation in nature, why should I be solicitous whether this or that man understood it or no, since we know that its lovers and the adepts have always concealed themselves with all their endeavour, even as also it is declared to others in their books. Neither have all, or at least very many, been known but after their death, but whilst they were alive they lay concealed with the greatest diligence. This at least is clear, that it is so far from being a new device, that there have men skilful of it through many series of ages, who being different both in tongue and nation, and very many of them contemporary, have writ so agreeingly of the art, that they cannot be proved, by such as rightly understand them, either to corrupt or diversely to handle so much as one operation. I confess, at least, there may appear a great difficulty in reading their books. To a man unskilful of the thing, they write so obscurely, tropically, allegorically, and figuratively. Some also do intermingle many false things to ensnare the unworthy and unwary, that by this means they may distinguish philosophers from fools, but in some, all of them do strike at one mark and lead to the same inn. But those things which they deliver more obscurely, they do this to no other end, but that they may exclude the unworthy, as they often witness in their books. Bernard Trevisan, much adored by me, is found most candid. Also Ripley, an Englishman, Flamel, a Frenchman, Sendivogius, the author of the New Light, also the anonymous author of the Hermetic Secrets, yet whose name hath delivered a double anagram, as to wit Spesmia est in agno, in a book whose title is Enchiridion Physica Restitux, and Genos Undataji in his Hermetic Arcanum. I would not pass by here the Ladder of Philosophers, the Great Rosary, the works of Arnoldus, the Boy's Play, the works of Dionysius, Zacharias, Egidius Stavadis, the works of Morin, Augurellus his poems, of making gold, also 5 treatises of the Rosary abbreviated, the works of Peter Bonus of Ferrara. In a word, I would have all the books included which are agreeable to these aforesaid, and those which are otherways excluded, which being compared as is fit, before the work be begun, in the first place the studious scholar of art may learn the lives, kingdoms, manners and habits of metals, and also of minerals, nor delight himself in the bare notion, but know them scientifically, that is, practically. But to this end there is need of a profound meditative contemplation, that he may learn and understand the original of natural things in the genus and of mineral bodies in the species. As for me, being only intentive to the doctrine of metals, to wit, as far forth as it seems to explain the art of transmutation, I willingly pass. By the original of natural things in the genus, content to have spoken those things which may satisfy the aforesaid purpose, yet I will briefly touch the rest in order. All the common philosophers have delivered that there are 4 elements compounding all things originally, from whence are all things, to which they resolve, from whose divers coalition, divers things proceed. Almost all chemical philosophers have subscribed to this unhappy opinion, no other cause of which I am able to conjecture than that without mature deliberation, they being prepared to their own interest, they have hastily described these first foundations, 311 of things, which opinion of theirs, I not daring to disallow, upon the account of the honour and reverence I have for them, will handle it philosophically otherways according to the truth of the matter. For I only acknowledge 3 elements, which they contend to be 4, all which experience teacheth to be cold of their own nature, to wit, air, water, and earth, for that the only defect, being caused by the remote distance of the calefactive sun, which doth bring a coldness upon all these things, and that is more remiss or intense, by how much the greater or lesser distance it is removed. For I altogether reject an elementary fire. Also I deny that there is any besides our common fire, which burns in the kitchens, whose heat is always destructive in itself. Neither do I deny, notwithstanding, that there is heat in things, flowing either from light or motion or life or alterative blast, no other. The pyrate Vulcan doth burn and waste concrete things by feeding upon them, and it is the most corrupt violent motion, caused from the repugnancy which arises from two contrary active things, but yet it is not an element, as being neither substance nor accident as far as appertains to the actual burning, but the expression of the activity of two agents, mutually in themselves, in a capacious subject. I would not show now what things are required in order to fire actually burning, besides the accident of heat and substance, in which this action is made. At least we assert this heat, although its heat be an accident, yet that it itself is neither an accident nor a substance, but the express operation, or the activity of two active things and acting mutually upon one another, which activity I could easily demonstrate in every combustible thing burning, but that it would be foreign to this place. And as I do altogether reject elemental fire, in the meanwhile being content with a ternary number of the elements, and do assert the first native quality cold, neither do I attribute to them heat, except accidental, as is said, so neither do I admit these three by their commixtion to go into the composition of natural things. For that the disproportion of things to be mingled takes away the mixture fit for generation, and the possibility thereof, for a natural generation is made by the union of generative ingredients. Moreover, union is an ingression of things to be united per minima, but if the least of one thing be tenfold or 100-fold more subtile than the little of another, the adequate littles cannot come together, for that it behoves very little things to come together, which we seek to unite per minima. From hence water mixed with earth is not united with it, even as neither water with wine, or phlegmy with spirit, yea, they may be separated, because of this disproportion amongst the littles. If any one shall say, in order to make this mixture, one thing undergoes the subtlety of another, and so by consequence are united, I urge that if it be equally subtile, which was first thick, that it may enter liquid by uniting itself, it behoves that it be altogether brought to the same nature. And what then, I pray, is earth but water? For that water will not go into earth, that it may have an union with earth, that is to say, a body will not enter a body so unitively, and if it be so, how foolish is it to imagine this, that earth is convertible to water, that it should promote the generation of a concrete with water. And if this should be granted, the thing would be said to be produced of water. If so be before it was possible to be produced, the earth had gone into real water, but this is necessary, or otherwise the little of this will not be able to agree with the little of the other, and as yet air is wanting, whose little is much more subtile than the little of water, unless all things be held to vanish into air, that also the aforesaid water may have it a companion to it, self in generating, which if it should be granted, it would follow that all things did consist of air alone, which air, although it be originally in its own nature from itself, or gathered together of earth and water, changed between themselves, yet it will be the same thing, nor diversified because of the difference of its original. For, unless it be the same it cannot be united, to wit, that water may have the same subtlety with air, it is obliged to have the same first qualities with it, the same also is to be judged of the earth, that it may be adequated to the rarity of the water, and if it be so water so subtilized will be real air, and earth so subtilized will be real water. And now where is the composition of things generated by elements, when according to this doctrine all things are necessary to proceed from air, and of fire how much more subtilly a quaternity of elements being admitted with this doctrine of mixture. But if any one should say that it is true that the elements are so converted, I would ask him by what agent they were changed. Moreover, if earth goes into water, water into air, that so there may be an union of compounding elements to make an elementary thing, I would ask again what need there is to unite another new to earth reduced into real water, so also to mingle new air to water subtilized to 36, the rarity of air, as though one and the same element, so convertible into another, being converted could not procreate an effect of itself without the mixture of the other. If it be said that earth, as aforesaid, being subtilized, is equal to water in rarity, and yet is not water, even as neither is water air, I would ask then whether or no the one can put on the first qualities of the other. If not, neither will they have correspondence in their littles, for this is impossible. If so, I desire to know whether if one first should put on the firsts of another first, that would not be really the first, whose firsts it first puts on. To assert the contrary is not philosophical, therefore it is concluded that all things materially take their original from one element, which cannot be neither earth nor air, which, unless I studied brevity, I could easily demonstrate. The earth is a soil or bed in which all bodies increase and are preserved. The air into which they grow, it is the means and bringer of heavenly virtues, wherewith it is filled, and by which they are communicated to all these inferior things. The seed of all things is put into the water by the Creator in the first creation, which some do produce into the air, as vegetables, some keep within their own reigns, as animals. In some it is hid very abstruse, as in metals, and there is, even to the end of the world, seed sufficient to produce all things of seed, whose habitation, as is said, the water is found to be. This seed, always idle, being stirred up by its form, which form is a certain particle of ineffable light, heavenly virtue, which is present to endue, in reference to place and a convenient agent with its force, inferior things aptly disposed, and to stir them up to motion, so I say the seed being stirred up with. An active virtue does coagulate the material water with its fermentaceous odour, which it so changes by various fermentations, the author of all changes, until it has produced that, to produce which the seed was propense. If therefore there be a metallic seed, there grows from thence first a dry humour, slippery, not wetting the hands, to wit mercury, the mother of all metals. I could here teach the procreation of stones of every sort, also note very many things worthy of observation about the first nativity of mercury, but I purposely pass by those things, making little to the purpose. For mercury has deserved to be called the true matter of metals, because before it was mercury that it might be destined to metal, yet it might happen by some defect, that something different from metal did result from thence. But when once it is mercury, then indeed no longer can anything be born from thence, but mineral or metalline. From this the different kind of metals which are seen, as, for instance, Jupiter, Saturn, Luna, Venus, Mars, Sol, which all have one and the same mother, Mercury, also some middle minerals arise from hence, some also are made of. The metals themselves eroded with acid mineral salts, so vitriol from a vein of copper, eroded by such an acid stalagma, whose generation to teach would be from the matter, therefore I purposely omit it. But not any intervening sulphurous fatness, as some think falsely, is joined to the mercury which it coagulates, boiling it with its heat, whose expurgation afterwards is the perfection of metal. For we know that sulphur, as it is called, in Jupiter, is much more impure than sulphur in Saturn, although mercury in Saturn be more crude, and unclean than mercury in Jupiter. And yet even common people will witness that Jupiter is a more pure metal than Saturn. Therefore we must not think with them of a metallic digestion by such a fat colostrum, when in mercury there is a proper internal digesting agent, to wit, heat, which being caused by a coelestial influence, infuseth life and motion to this our matter, which life and motion depend from an adaptation of a convenient matrix, or place fit for generation. For although all of these above-essayed things are full of this most plentiful virtue, and this is present to all, to the information of them, yet it does not actually act by informing, that is, by exciting to motion, except as far forth as it is helped by extrinsics rightly accommodated, and so then this heavenly virtue acts incessantly, which although it be uniform, and one in the whole world, yet it is varied by reason of the seed, according to which the ferments of things are diversified to produce diverse transmutations. Wherefore, if mercury born here shall find a place in itself fit for, Generation, although in itself without such a place it appear cold, for that it is dead, yet within the centre of its own. Nativity, the generative action not being yet intermitted, this force or heavenly virtue being caused as well from the light as a rotation of superior things, and by means of the air most plentifully diffused to all things, and through all things, I say this virtue, as it has reference to light, will cause some heat, and as it has reference to the rotation of the superiors, will cause motion in this inferior subject. This heat and celestial motion cannot be without its life, in which they are. I mean not an animal life, nor yet vegetable, but a formal. From these ferments are produced by an altering blast, which daily doth change the matter and transmute it, until the heavenly predominate, inducing a greater or lesser fixation, according to the accommodation of the place, helping or retarding digestion. From one and the same mother, the aforesaid different offspring do proceed, only diversified by the inequality of the maturity, by reason of which inequality some crude superfluities which are not of metallic imposition, but being in the mercury are separable from it. These, I say, being not purged, receiving a coagulation with the pure, does seem to specificate amongst metals, and those feculent crudities, being different by reason of the variation of the generative matrix mercury, and it is coagulated different, and possesses this difference according to the embryo of the place. Moreover, the matter of all metals is one, to wit, mercury, which properly tends to procreate sol or lunar, for the different respect in the degree 4z of perfection. If any feces of mercury be commixed in its generation, these are accidents, neither do enter into a mercurial substance, of which partly the diversity, and partly the difference of the place in which the digestion is made. From a different coagulation with this one pure, the same one thing puts on different masks, and so produceth imperfect metals in their species. I avoid a particular description of the genealogy of all metals, because I make haste to the renovation and multiplication only of sol and lunar. Therefore I betake myself to the task. Chap, third of gold and silver, how they come of mercurial matter, and of the possibility of changing imperfect metals to the perfection of these. Out of the foresaid fountain, as is said, springs Sol and his sister Luna, to wit. This matter is brought to perfection by digestion. Now perfection is twofold, either begun or complete, that is, partly or wholly. Complete perfection is the outmost bound to which nature aims of her own accord, to wit, that all crudity being decocted, and all dregs cleansed out, the metallic nature may triumph without any coagulated dross. This sun of ours has its rising, and does illuminate the earth with its beams and splendour. But begun perfection, as I may so say, is not called perfection properly, and yet, in respect of that which is formally imperfect, it deserves not improperly to be called perfection. For it is to be judged formal in perfection, when the crudity is not so decocted, which did stick to the pure in generation by accident, nor yet the heterogeneous superfluity is so purged out, but it is left mingled with the pure in coagulation in so great quantity that it predominates over it, and at last overcomes it. So it happens to all metals, sol and luna excepted, which are corrupted easily by all corrupting elements, also are consumed by fire. But when the crudity is so bound, and the feculent superfluity so purged out before coagulation, that the pure has such dominion over the impure, to be delivered from the corruptive tyranny thereof, this is to be accounted the first degree of perfection. But a total expurgation of the feces and the rejection of the impure is the top or highest perfection of metallic operations. And yet these crudities and feces were not originally of the same imposition of nature with metallic mercury, nay, they were separable, whose separation before coagulation is the perfection of metals. But if they be not purged out before coagulation, yet this has in no wise united them to the pure, nay, they are separable yet, although not by nature without the help of another, but by art, the handmaid of nature. Hence the original and basis of the transmutatory art, and this the true foundation of alchemy, to wit, that a more impure metal may possess in, itself the same pure of which gold is, with which although some impure be concoagulated, yet this impure is no wise of metallic imposition. Although one imperfect metal differs from another, also from the perfect, therefore, since it is heterogeneous, it may be separated by a triumphant agent, which if it could be found above the earth, most surely an impure and imperfect metal would go into pure perfect gold and silver, with respect to digestive separation. For that, every separating agent will be by the same reason a digestive agent, since this separation is impossible to be effected without an effectual digestive power. Such an agent is our divine arcanum, for it is a heavenly spirit and of a fiery virtue, therefore has the power of penetrating, and yet doth shew the native proprieties of gold, for it is gold digested to the supreme degree, wherefore it transcends and excels. Common, gold by many degrees, in an homogeneity of the same kind and nature. Although, furthermore, it be a spiritual body, yet it doth overcome any other body in the world by its fixity, to the end it may retain. The homogeneous, pure, when it is cast upon imperfect metals, lest they should fly away from the fire because of their crudity, whilst the feces are exposed to be burned by its heterogeneous violence, in which thing alone all transmutative digestion consists. For fire is the trial of gold, I say our Vulcan, which by burning will take away all combustible impurity from the pure, if so be that that which is pure don't fly away from the trial of the fire because of its tender crudity. But all imperfect metals, although they contain a pure in themselves, yet this pure is so crude that is mixed with the impure, that not bearing the fire, and yet predominating over this, flying away from the fire snatches it along with it, which otherwise would rejoice at the fire as its like. Moreover, arcanum, because a spiritual homogeneous substance, does enter such like imperfect metals per minima, and what it finds like to it, self, and by its prevailing power, defends it from the violence of the burning fire, and retains its more than perfect fixity in the meanwhile burning Vulcan does feed upon the combustible by his flame, which being consumed by the fire, pure gold remains, or silver, according to the quality of the medicine, sustaining all the violence of the fire, and remaining in all probations, not at all inferior to the mineral, but rather excelling it. Wherefore we do not, as some detractors object, profess to create gold or silver, but to find and effect an agent which, being cast upon imperfect metals, can enter them per minima because of its homogeneity and spirituality. Moreover, that it may defend the pure by its prevailing power and virtue from the combustion of the fire, which, finding alike to itself, retains it, until the superfluous feces be destroyed by the burning tyranny of Vulcan, which operation is chrysopoetic transmutation. All this our secret elixir performs. Moreover it has this, that it as well communicates its tincture, as it is to fixity, actually to the imperfect, since that it is both of the highest exuberant colour and fixity. Chap. 4th. Concerning the seed of gold, also the question answered whether other metals have seed. For the preserving, propagating, and producing every species, seed was given by the great Creator to things, and seed is the perfection of everything, and that which has no seed is deservedly to be judged imperfect, therefore it is not to be doubted that there is metallic seed. Either all these things were created in the first 6 days, which are or have been in the world, or at least they have increased, being augmented daily, the first both reason and experience denies. Therefore, if the latter, then no body can deny that there is metallic seed, which, if there be, surely the metal does not. Loose it in coagulation, for coagulation is the effect of perfection, or rather of maturation which leads straight to perfection, if the exteriors be rightly disposed. Moreover its seed is a sign of perfection, because it is so matured. Therefore it is not probable that the seed is lost by coagulation, but is rather rendered more noble. It is plain by this that metallic seed is in metals, therefore it may be sked whether all metals have seed in themselves. I would answer by saying all have one and the same seed, but in some it resides nearer, in others more remote. But this seed is the seed of gold. For it is in no wise lawful to think that love has the seed of Jove, Saturn of Saturn, and so of the rest, that is in a jovial form, Saturnine, or martial, for it is purely accidental, but the pure matter is aureus, to which nothing is wanting besides a bare digestion, separative of the dregs, consumptive of the crudities, and inductive of fixity. But the form of gold is substantial, that is, founded upon the substance of matter itself, so purified, therefore there is an aureus seed in all imperfect metals tending to perfection, but accidentally 167 hindered in its progress. In digested gold there is the same seed, closely shut up, triumphing in perfection. Therefore, if it should be sought to bring seed out of imperfect metals, it being far remote, although truly existing, the labour will be in vain, for it is necessary that all be exalted to Sol, otherwise the seed is not separated from them, being the perfection of the thing, I mean seed not. Mercury, which is in all, and is to be drawn out of all, to that force in which and by which they are all multiplied, but Saturn is not multiplicable in Saturn, but in gold only, to wit, where he shall come to gold, that he may afterwards emit his seed, that is, his most digested virtue from himself, that multiplication may have its original from this. Concerning Luna, it may not be unprofitable here to add something, whom any one would easily believe to have seed, because she is perfect. It seems to make for this opinion, there being an elixir serving to the projection of the white. Truly one grants that there is a multiplicative seed, both of the white and red, but this white is only contained in the reins of Sol, and although there be a multiplication of Luna, yet the seed will not be found immediately in Luna, but has a necessity to proceed from Sol. Therefore, as we have said, this lunar whiteness is the first degree of perfection, whose solar yellowness is the complement. For the mother of our stone, which is called Luna, not common but philosophical, is white, because it dealbates our Sol, which is the father of our stone with its whiteness, from whence the offspring, which arises from these two parents, is white, first in imitation of the mother's form, and then it is perfect seed, multiplicative white. Afterwards it grows red with a royal sanguineous redness, endued with a crassipoetic power. Chap 5th, concerning the virtue of the seed of gold, and in what it is immediately included, but that we may obtain this arcanum, with which we might bring imperfects to perfection, by a projection upon them, first of all it is to be noted what we have said of our arcanum, to wit, that it is gold exalted. To the supreme degree of perfection to which it can be brought by art and nature, also it will be observed that in gold nature hath obtained a bound of her operation, neither can it move itself of its own accord any further. And yet its seed is further to be matured with sagacious wit. But this lies further abstruse, neither easily appears to the sight, as other ways the seed of vegetables. Or animals may be exhibited to the eyes, notwithstanding by sagacious too. Art it may be extracted, and so far exalted above its own virtue, in which nature has rested, that it may excel it 1,000 times. I could relate many things of this seed, which are rather to be kept secret, but the difference between this metallic and vegetable or animal seed is diligently to be observed for this, because the dissimilarity of the part bringing forth seed is discerned when parted from the whole body, but that metallic is not so. But since the least of gold is real gold, therefore its seed lies by littles, neither can be separated from its body, the body in the mean while remaining a guest. But when the manifestation of the seed it is done with the plenary destruction of the metal, and so metal reduced goes wholly into seed, therefore there is made a multiplication of the seed, rather by virtue and dignity than quantity and number. That is, it is nobilitated rather than increased, the golden matter being reduced into seed because of the similarity of parts, because in respect of a stone, gold is holy matter, when the secret profundity is manifested is holy sperm, which by circulating receives the virtue of superiors and inferiors, and then it becomes holy form or heavenly virtue capable of communicating this to others, which are related to it by the homogeneity of matter. The place in which the seed resideth is immediately water, for in speaking properly and exactly, the least part of metal is seed, but invisible. But because this invisible is universally poured out through all the water of its kind and inhabits tea, and exert its virtues in it, nor is anything else manifested but water, although the internal agent, which properly is seed, reason persuades us to be there, wherefore we promiscuously call the whole seed, as we call a whole grain seed, when yet the germinating life is only the least particle of the grain. But life, or seminal virtue, is not so distinguished in metals, but is inseparably commixed through the least of the body containing. I have added these things of the seed, because it is said above that a metal, whose profundity has been so manifest under a mercurial form, doth all go into seed. For we name all that water the seed of gold, because it is exquisitely diffused through it, inasmuch as it cannot be separated but by reason alone. This is called occult ferment, poison by the ancient wise philosophers, also invisible fire, the secret agent. Neither also have I alone named the woe promiscuously seed A after a manner, but these also have often called their water fire. Sometimes they taught that fire resides in their water. Wherefore they distinguish this into soul and spirit, of which the former is the means, the latter the active virtue by that means. Therefore we name water seed metonymically, when yet in speaking properly, the seminal virtue universally inhabits, and is diffused through the whole water, which indeed is seed, but is not separable from the habitation of its water. If it seem a wonder to anyone that I assign water the seat of the seminal spirit, let not this seem a wonder that the Spirit of God in the 731 first creation was carried upon the waters, that is, the heavenly spirit infused through the waters. It enriched them with its power and prolific virtue. For in this alone all seeds which are in the universe were founded from the first beginning, neither ever go out of it, and yet in vegetables they are produced into the crude air, in animals preserved within their reins, in minerals they are firmly shut up in their profundity, for it is impossible that seed should go out of its original seat. Therefore, if all things are from water, as we have said reason will teach us, tea at the seed even as yet doth reside in water. Things are not preserved any other way then from whence they spring, for the cause of the original being taken away, the effect is taken away. Hence it comes to pass that the multiplication of all things is in humido and per humido, even as the nutriment. Vegetables by a watery lephers of earth, animals by a liquid chili, metals by a mercurial liquor. Hence vegetables, being increased and produced of their own accord, does separate a seed different from their whole body into the crude air, which will be a coagulated body, but that it may be known that it has proceeded from water, and does retain its seminal spirit in the water. It is committed to the earth to increase its species, in which matrix, by a watery lephers of earth, it is resolved into its next watery matter, and then begins the vegetation. Moreover, the watery seminal receives this watery lephers, by which it is manifest in the dissolution, and that germination is for radical nutritive humour by which it receives increase to a plant or tree, according to the specific ferment of the seed. Animals do keep within their reins a seed sprung from imagination, which by the act of generation, being diffused into a due matrix, forms a fetus, tender, and abounding with much humidity, which afterwards is increased by the liquid female menstruums, and increases into a perfect infant, and coming into the world, 751 in the hour of its nativity, is nourished by milk, until he can bear stronger aliment, which then, unless they are changed into a liquid chyle, as bones in the stomach of a dog, don't nourish. In like manner to all these things, metals coagulated doth shut up their seed, perfectly elaborated under thick coverts, yet being placed in water, this afterwards, being extracted by sagacious art, increases, and is cherished in a due matrix, until by a previous corruption it receives its glorification. But this work is very difficult because of the secret folds of metals in which this seed is shut, giving place to no force unless there be a subtile wit. Moreover, I make it known that there is a matrix in which gold being put, from whence seed or one is to be sought, will emit its sperm freely and sweetly, until it be weakened and die, and by its death shall be renewed into a most glorious king, having afterwards got the power of delivering all his brethren from the fear of death. Chap. 6th of the manner and means of extracting its seed. Those things are always most difficult which are most excellent, as the experience of all ages will bear ample testimony. It is not to be wondered, therefore, if so great a difficulty be found in a subject so oble before others. For I do not well know any work, in rerum natura, encompassed with more difficulties than this is. Wherefore, if any one shall enter upon this work, and yet would spare his mind from study and labour, he must return back again, for he has missed his way in the very entrance. For that, the evils which are in the work appear terrible, chiefly upon the account of despondency. But if the Father of Lights shall grant the key of the art to any one, there remains to him nothing one more than the work of women and the play of children, as to delight his eyes as he labours with most beautiful appearing signs, until he shall reap his harvest, that he may possess the most precious treasure of all the world. But without this, error and loss, care and vexation, will be the fruits of his vain philosophy. Therefore every wise man, before he enters upon his work, shall be first and chiefly solicitous of knowing it with its marks, that if by chance any difficulties may appear in it, he being armed against them may not, after his work is begun, be compelled to return with trouble and sorrow. Therefore let all sons of art know that in order to attain our arcanum there is need to manifest the most hidden seed of gold, which is not done but by a plenary, and every way volatilization of the fixed, and then the corruption of its form. Moreover, so to destroy gold is the most secret work of the whole world. For this divine science is not completed in a corrosive detapation of the metal, nay, all such corrosions are false and erroneous, since that there is required to our work not any dissolution, but philosophical, that is, into mercurial water, made by a previous calcination, by a mercurial agent, which is produced by a subtile rotation and conversion of elements, which calcination is a mortification of a homogeneous humid with a dry of its own nature, that afterwards the dry may be vivified by the said humid so far that the most digested virtue by dissolving, being extracted by the dissolvent, may be the cause of this calcination and dissolution. Is there anything here common with a corrosive contrition of bodies by mineral waters? Nay, rather, the foresaid operations are diametrically opposite. If any one shall consider these things rightly, he will easily perceive the trouble of the work. For gold, being the most solid, most fixed of all bodies, and of the strongest composition, most patient of the fire, and not at all obnoxious to corruption, does not easily pass over into a nature so contrary to this of its own. Therefore, if any one shall attempt this by force, he will profit nothing, seeing there is required an agent of an excelling virtue to do this, which ought to be homogeneal, amicable, and spiritual, namely, that it may be related to the body, and yet be able to overcome it, and fundamentally penetrate it, whose secret parts, since they are distended so far, and so little gold, is true, gold will not so easily puting off its form, nay, it will fight until it be wholly overcome. It lies down and dies. Also it follows that our agent ought to have an enlivening virtue, that it may raise up a new pure body from the dead carcasses. Chap. 7th of the first philosophical agent, or matrix, into which our seed is to be emitted, and into which it is ripened. Moreover, such an agent remains to be sought out by us, wherewith we may do all the aforesaid things, in which it is required, first of all, that the water be homogeneal, that is, by a law of necessity. For that I have taught before, that the golden seed doth lie hid in the water alone, and doth obtain its power. But it is shut up in the body of the gold under most thick folds, of which is manifest a plain contrary one to that hidden one which we seek. Therefore this water remains to be drawn out by a subtile artifice, but it doth not enter in of its own accord. Therefore this is to be effected by another thing, which other thing indeed ought to be of the same nature with that which we seek to draw forth. For every like begets its like, that is, every agent exercising its generative action upon any thing changes that upon which it acts into its own nature as near as it can. And nextly it behoves this water to be related to the body to be dissolved, and therefore pure, clean, and exquisitely cleansed and purged from all filth. Neither is this enough, but gold is held to be contraried in all its qualities, in which it differs from the water we seek, wherein the seed lies hid. The former is highly fixed, the other highly volatile, the former a most solid body, this a most penetrating spirit, the one thick, the other subtile, the one dead, the other living and enlivening, and all the other conditions are required which we seek in it after dissolution, but they are wanting in a dead coagulated body. Therefore it is concluded that mercury alone is the true key of the chemical art, which is indeed that dry water so often described by philosophers fluent, slippery, and yet not wetting the hands of the toucher, or any other thing which is not of the unity of its matter, and moreover it is induced with the virtues above described. This is the keeper of our gates, our balsam, oil, honey, our urine, May-dew, our female, mother, egg, secret furnace, stove, sieve, marble, true fire, venomous dragon, treacle, burning wine, green lion, bird of Hermes, goose of Hermogenes, double sword in the hand of the cherub that descends the way of the tree of life, and is famous for infinite other names, and it is our vessel, true. Hidden, also, it is our philosophical garden, in which our sun rises and sets. It is our royal mineral, and triumphant vegetable, Saturnia also. The caduce of Mercury, because it operates wonderful things, and transforms itself according to its own pleasure, that it may put on different masks. Concerning this water the philosopher saith, let chemists boast as they will, but the transmutation of metals is impossible without this. What shall I say, what shall I discourse, that I may report its praises? It is not so in its own nature, as we render it by our artifice. It is a thing very vile, and yet the most precious treasure of all the world. Oh, the perfection of nature, and the head of metallic works! Therefore, thou son of learning, and studious of art, attend that thou mayest attain thy desire. Take that which is most unclean of itself, that is our harlot, purge throughly all the filth, and draw from thence what is the purest, that is our menstruum, or regal diadem. Behold, I have finished in few words that which ennobles a philosopher, delivers from errors, and leads forthwith into a most fair field of delights. Therefore, that I may conclude this chapter, I will repeat succinctly all things which hath been said before. There is a certain and true science called alchemy, whereby every imperfect metal is perfected into gold or silver by the projection of the triumphant arcanum upon them, penetrating and tinging, which secret is no other than gold exalted to its supreme degree of perfection, and this by sagacious art, the handmaid of nature. For that all imperfect metals are of the same material imposition with gold, nor do differ but in the accidents alone, as also by the manners and degrees of incompleted decoction. And that which being imperfect is mixed with them is plainly heterogeneous, and although it stick externally to the pure, yet it is not united inwardly, and therefore may be rejected by a prevalent agent, such as our complete elixir, to obtain which secret the sperm which lies secret in the body of the gold is to be drawn out, which is shut up in the most thick coverts, and gives place to no power, but only is manifest by sagacious art, which when it appears, being hid first, it comes out under a mercurial form, from whence it is exalted into the fifth essence, first white, then red, by a continual decocting fire. And all this is done by a homogeneous, mercurial pontique agent, pure, clean, crystalline without transparency, liquid without humectation, which is water truly divine, Neither it is found upon the earth. No, the son of philosophers is made by this, nature co-operating, which we know, have seen, have done, have, and possess, and study, to make it plain to the ingenious, yet so that driving away the unworthy, we may exclude them altogether from the art, who being cast off, we will accompany the studious into this most beautiful garden. Chap. 8th of the genealogy of the philosophical Mercury, its rise, birth, and distinguishing signs that go before and accompany it. Some boasting and arrogant sophisters, after having learned from the reading of books that common Mercury is very foreign to this art, also reading that philosophers do call this by diverse names, being led presently, with a blind opinion, they think themselves secure of the art, and do not blush to affirm themselves masters of this science, when in the meantime they are more blockish than the wood itself. Some will have this to be a diaphanous menstruum and limped, others a certain metallic gum, when they dream it to be permissible with metals, and to no purpose. Others who seek the true mercury do endeavour to draw it either out of common mercury by infinite previous purgations, or of metals by refusative salts, as they call them, neither water nor gum, nor calx nor powder, notwithstanding fat or unctuous. But those that endeavour to draw mercury out of herbs and such like are thick-skulled and of wretched wit. But this opinion happens to them through a deep ignorance of metallic matters. They seek things pure, but what are they ignorant of? They do not apprehend the operations of philosophical mercury in its causes, being uncertain. They therefore seek something instead of common mercury, for they do not know in what the mercury of the vulgar is wanting to be the true mercury of philosophers, and yet they reject it, because philosophers do not choose it, or lastly do seek, by washing, subliming, and decocting, to alter it from its nature, not doubting but it will put on its true philosophical form, if it has once put off its own. It would be a trouble to reckon up such like operations. Wherefore I pass over to the thing itself, whence there may be a true index of its truth and falsity, of its straightness or obliquity. I have taught before that all metals are of the same material principle, to wit, of mercury. It follows, therefore, that mercury is indeed a metallic thing, and therefore, although common, yet originally doth obtain a homogeneous matter with all metals. If therefore philosophical mercury will be an homogeneous metallic water, it follows that materially and fundamentally it is not distinguished from other mercury, unless so far forth as one is purer than the other and more hot, and yet both are dry mineral water. Therefore let the sons of learning know that the matter of common mercury ought and can pass, sat into the matter of philosophic mercury, although not into the whole substance which is beheld in it. For certainly all ingenious chemists know that there is no other mercury, from whence come all metals, than common, namely in respect of its original, which is generated in the bowels of the earth, as long as it hath remained safe. From the crude air, in a place fit and accommodated to generation, it is altogether destined to procreate metal, and did retain its motion and excitation in itself, that it might be stirred up to a perfect generation for the fitness of the place being violated or vitiated by chance. This matter, as though it were struck with the hammer of death, altogether looseth all motion, neither be moved further any more like an egg, upon which a hen hath set for some time, being cooled, is thenceforth rendered unfit to produce a fetus. The pure life or internal heat altering vanishes away, the outward failing, and so that which before every day tended to perfection, now being hindered by chance, becomes abortive, no hopes nine being left of a future spontaneous motion. This is the cause when some have tried with heat artificially invented to heap earth upon mercury, they have obtained but a mock reward of their labours. Therefore the form in its access is taken away, or rather hindered, which, as above said, is a particle of ineffable light, which is present in lightening its dwelling, so long as all things shall be rightly disposed outwardly, and so it leaves an impression of itself in things, which being received by things, doth produce the ferment, which is the true author of all transmutation, altering things themselves, in which it is, by its fermentaceous odour, stirring up to a corruptive as well. As a generative motion, But the accidents required to these things, failing from without, all these things fall of their own accord, neither is the ruin easily repaired by any art. Therefore there is left to us a crude metallic, indigested, cold matter, neither purged by decoction, which, in respect to minerals, imitates the nature of fountain water, in respect to vegetables and animals. This is the true matter to which the form of philosophical mercury is wanting, for which it is held to change its own, that there may be made from thence what we seek for. But it is different from this form, in a double respect. First, of the superfluity it retains in itself. Secondly, of that spiritual virtue which is wanting in it. Superfluity is twofold, the leprous earthy part and the hydropical watery part, but there is a defect of true sulphurous heat, the addition of which will throughly purge out all its superfluities. For philosophical water is the womb, but there is no womb fit for generation without heat. Add therefore, and supply to mercury that which is wanting, to wit, a fiery force to burn, and his dregs will fall from him of its own accord, which thou shalt exquisitely separate. If thou shalt perform this, thou hast perfected the work of a very quick-sighted and skilful philosopher. Then Jupiter has got his kingdom, and the lowering clouds of Saturn being discussed, he hath made a 911 bright and glittering fountain to appear unto thee. Thou wilt wonder at the extraordinary brightness of this water, whose extraordinary virtues, which it doth not receive from the matter, but the form, are to be found in no other thing in the whole world. For instance, it dissolves gold naturally, by a true philosophic solution, not as endeavouring sophisters dissolve, by corrosive filthy waters, and endeavouring to estrange it from a metallic matter as far as they can. This mercury doth produce naturally gold and silver of itself, also the arcanum of aurum potabile, which I write knowingly, also the adepts do know and witness the same. Therefore I will conclude this little treatise, because what other things do remain to be spoken are delivered in a peculiar treatise candidly written by me. In the meantime, enjoy thou these things, expect the blessing from God. Farewell, for thou shalt obtain this from the Father of lights alone. So I have said, so done. Praise to God. A short manuduction to the celestial ruby, written in Latin by Eirenaeus Philalethes, translated into English by a lover of art and nature. London, printed by T. Sowell in Holywell Lane in Shoreditch, 1694. Tract the second, a short manuduction to the celestial ruby, of the philosophical stone, and the secret thereof. The stone of philosophers is a certain coelestial substance, spiritual, fixed, perfecting all metals into true gold and silver, according to the quality of the medicine exposed to all trials, and that according to the imitation of nature and its operations, as near as it can be done. About this substance the art of chemistry is conversant, which handleth and teacheth the means and way of doing it, 94, but not by divers things, but by one thing alone it is done, to which nothing is to be added, nothing taken away, but only the superfluities removed. But that which appertains to the authority of this art, experience in this thing, would be of much value to convince men, for if it could be proved that true gold was made thereby, then indeed it would not be doubted both concerning the truth and benefit thereof. But it is plain that imperfect metals are transmutable after this manner, because all in general have been destinated to perfection, but some have remained imperfect for want of digestion. Therefore, if they can be duly cocted, would also be perfect, and seeing nothing hinders in the matter, but this may be done, because out of one fountain all metals have proceeded, to wit, crude mercury, cold and moist, in which there hath been no difference between Sol and Saturn, but only what nature works afterwards in this matter, to wit, decocting it more or less. This alone hath made the diversity. Therefore all other metals may be perfected into Sol, to wit, by the help of our divine and most perfect magistry, which being projected upon imperfect metals is able so far to perfect them, by decocting, as it is of a more than due perfection required in gold. Here, therefore, we may observe of how great virtue and spiritual a nature this our divine stone is, which can perfect that in 1 hour above the earth by a bare projection, which nature could not have perfected by subterranean operations. Therefore it is manifest here what nature helped by art can do. For that our stone, as it was perfected by nature without the help of art, was only of unary virtue, but the virtue which is acquired by art, nature cooperating and assisting, is denary in every regimen, that is, after a manner infinite, for it cannot be computed, for that first, by dissolving it, and again coagulating and decocting it, one part of the medicine falls upon 1,000 of imperfect metals, penetrating and perfectly, tinging it. But if the dissolution and coagulation, being iterated, thou shalt try to promote this medicine further, behold, it is extended in infinitum. For you shall sooner want wit to compute than the elixir virtue to penetrate, and tinge, not that immediately by its corporeal touch it tinges the whole, but by its virtue and influence passes through the whole, since the least particle of the imperfect body is touched and tinged immediately by the medicine. But the matter is so, every part is tinged by the contiguous part, like leaven. Therefore the elixir tinges that which it touches more immediately, with a tincture a little more feeble. Then it was itself. This again ferments that which is nearest it, by communicating the tincture, and that so long until the whole mass be brought to the perfection of true gold. But this is done in a short space of time, because of the spirituality of our agent, which, being a true metallic fire, like that elementary one, does imperceptibly warm and penetrate the hardest bodies, even those parts which were not touched by the coals, and so this doth penetrate with its virtue metals, being resolved by the fire and fused in a moment, so it bath oftentimes been observed, that Tao is fermented by the ferment, even that outward part, which the corporeal part of the ferment never touched. Just so it is done in this work. Observe therefore how natural this progress is in this work. For we do not profess to create gold and silver, as some reproachers falsely object by our art, but out of those things we say only in which these are by nature, to wit, out of metals, which are of the same matter with gold, and silver, but of an unequal digestion, and therefore remain imperfect, which, by the projection of our arcanum upon them, we digest and perfect. After this manner, since nothing else is required to perfect them, besides this simple decoction of their crudity, which our medicine can abundantly perform. Ho, therefore, you sons of learning, attend to me, because I will make known to you the whole secret of our stone, which is not a stone, and it is in every man, and may be found in its own place at all times. If you have this, you have the most precious thing in the whole world, but it is divine, and therefore not to be communicated to all. But to you, sons of learning, I will manifest the whole thing, neither will I conceal anything necessary to this magistery. But be present with attentive minds, and perceive my words, and lay them up in your secret breasts. You have heard before the possibility of transmutation, to wit, that a thing destined to perfection, but being left imperfect through defect of decoction, may, by the application of an agent of the same essence, and nature with the perfect but of greater digestion, be perfected, to which these imperfect were destinated and matured, inasmuch as the agent is of a more exuberant maturity, and more than perfect virtue. But our stone is such to all other imperfect metals, whence we conclude without controversy that these are transmutable thereby into gold and silver. Consider therefore, you lovers of wisdom, what and of what kind that ought to be, which can perform this, which by the philosophers is called a stone, but it is in every man and in every thing, and at every time of the year to be found in its place. Observe my words, note the mystery, because it will most certainly consist of the elements, than which nothing is more universal, and those not simply, but compounded and annotized, that is, every element being to be known by its quality. Therefore in everything is our stone, or everything, or rather out of everything, that is, element, for any one of them, being destroyed, the aureti perisheth. Be not therefore solicitous concerning anything combustible by the fire, For certainly that which is made out of everything, that is, contains the virtue or qualities of every element anatized, resisteth the violence of the fire without danger. Hearken therefore, you sons of learning. Behold, I make known to you the greatest mystery, and God help you to conceal this arcanum from all unworthy persons. Our stone does not draw its original elsewhere then from metals, and those the most perfect, but ye shall suffer common operators in this art, to seek it in all things extraneous. But as many of you as are lovers of truth, don't attempt to find it out elsewhere than in metals, for this is our one, nay, only true principle. But what that is, it will be your part to observe, neither to induce any heterogeneous thing into this work, but to leave that to others, which seek our stone in such things, but they shall always labour, as long as they shall be ignorant what our only true principle is. But I do make known this to you, remember therefore, that a lion is generated of a lion, a man of a man, but to expect the generation of these from other things, it would be absurd and ridiculous. Combustibles are produced even as combustibles, incorruptibles as incorruptibles. Lol, do you expect to gather grapes from thistles, or roses from thorns? It would be so absurd if any should go about to make our stone out of animals, herbs, or such like things, as though the principle of gold-making were elsewhere to be sought than in gold. Therefore our stone is not to be sought in such things, which ought to have the natural proprieties of true gold, which are not in such like things, neither to be found in them, except we be able to create sperms, which is in the power of no man, but is proper to God alone, and if any one should promise himself to effect this, he would be false and a liar. Therefore let it suffice us to dispose and administer sperms which are ready to our hands, but it is not to the matter that new ones should be created from heterogeneous things, which is both impossible to be done, and if it should be done, these artificial sperms would be of no more virtue than those natural ones which nature has fitted to our work. Therefore we must in no wise believe him that professes to produce the seed of metals out of vegetables. And see, for although he take to himself the title of a wonderful philosopher and a skilful artist, with the ignorant sort, yet whilst he knows not to use created things, it is much less probable that he can create sperms. Whosoever therefore will be a son of fart, let him learn and acknowledge that our stone, the transmuter of metals into a perfect species, is, nearly included and contained in most perfect metals. Out of these therefore let him be admonished to learn its production, and not elsewhere. Now therefore, if I be not deceived, you have heard plainly enough whence the matter of this secret stone is to be sought, and if you have well observed, it will not happen that you should err in this thing. Now let us say something of its name, for it is explained how it is in every man and place. Now I will teach how, and why it is called a stone and not a stone. Lastly, I will adumbrate how it is to be found. For the philosophers say that it is a stone, and not a stone which some understand ill, but the vulgar for the most part, but it is interpreted according to the letter. To be something, but what they are ignorant, to be like a stone, tinging everything, even by the very touch, into pure gold, whether it shall be wood or stone, which they repute for false, and deservedly. Therefore they judge it impossible to every art, except diabolical. Therefore the name of a chemist being heard, they presently abhor, and detest him, nor look upon him any other than a foolish waster of his estate, being incited to this by the false and confused understanding of our most secret stone. Therefore the more ignorant men do superstitiously believe that such men are to be punished by the civil law, but under the name of ignorant men I do not only mean those that are plebeians, or illiterate and unlearned, but also I mean some, nay many men otherwise learned, and perhaps pious, whom I therefore name ignorant and unskilful in this art, and also that they, endued with such rude manners, to bark at every thing unknown, like dogs, and speak evil of those things which they neither either have or could conceive in their minds. My reproof extends to them most, because they, being both learned and pious, do what is contrary to piety and learning, to wit, judge such things which they neither do nor can discern. For when learning admonishes, piety persuades that every one should consider and examine those things which he judges. These, on the other hand, condemn it, undoubtedly, which yet, after they have condemned, they know not, and are ignorant what it is, which is very unworthy every wise man. Moreover, others studious in the art of chemistry, although they understand the thing a little more natural, yet in this they err, because they would make some stony congelation, to wit, they would make something to bear the form of a stone, for this alleging the words of philosophers which affirm it to be a stone. But I would have you to understand that it is not called a stone because it is like a stone, but for this cause alone, that it flies not from the fire, but remain fixed in it, like as it were a stone, and for this it is called a stone, for the sake of hiding this secret, but it is like a stone no other ways, and therefore it is not a stone, but in species is gold more pure than the purest, in fixity, or in combustibility, a stone, in figure of most subtile powder, to sight a grave body, to touch impalpable, to taste sweet, of good smell, in virtue a most penetrating spirit, being dry and yet unctuous, easily flowing upon a plate of metal and tinging, therefore it is deservedly called the father of all wonderful things, since it hath all the elements in it, yet so anatized that none predominates, but all four make 1/5 essence or nature, which is none of the four, but partakes of all, and is a most temperate complexion, though it be pure metallic fire, and this is our stone, which is not a stone, nor has any name proper to itself, and yet there is nothing in all the world whose name it may not have, under some consideration, for that it is of so wonderful a nature, as if we call it spiritual, it is true, if corporeal we speak properly, for it is gold, and that not vulgar but spiritual, that is, subtile, penetrative, and noble, wherefore it is a spirit or 5th essence, the most noble of all creatures, after the rational soul, and bringing all distempers and all imperfections both in animals and metals according to the quality of the medicine to a most exact and perfect temperature, and that is truly our microcosme, which we esteem so much. Having this stone or powder or 5th essence, neither riches nor health will be wanting, God-giving, to whom be glory for ever. But that I may come to the last part of my undertaken task, to wit, that I may show by what means this, our stone, may be obtained. For it is not fabricated by nature, but it is to be sought, and to be composed by the art and ingenuity of the workman, yet nature helping and seconding his endeavour, for as it is abundantly enough declared that the matter of this stone is not to be fetched elsewhere than from metals, yet nevertheless these metals are not our stone, for they have another form different from our stone. Notwithstanding, I do not deny that our medicine is to be drawn from them, but the former form of the metal must necessarily be taken away, that it may be drawn out, and that under the conservation of the species, though under the destruction of that particular and individual metal, but the species of metals dwells and is conserved in the spirit, which spirit resides not in any other thing, but in water homogeneous, of its own kind, for water is the habitation of the spirit, which is especially to be retained in the conservation of its species. Therefore gold is to be changed from its form, and that into water homogeneous of its own kind, in which water the spirit of the gold is preserved, which afterwards reinspissates its water, and induces a new form, after putrefaction, 1,000 times more perfect, than the form of gold, which it lost by being reincrudated. Metallic bodies are to be reduced into homogeneal water, not wetting the hands, that out of this water a new species may result, far more noble than any metal. This is our most precious medicine and coelestial ruby. But all this work very well answers to the subterranean operations of nature, from whence the work is deservedly called natural. For nature doth produce metals, according to their species, out of mercury alone, cold and moist, by a daily digestion and coction in the veins of the earth. But art, to shorten the work, hath found out a far more subtile operation, yet like to this, for it conjoins with crude mercury, cold and moist, ripe gold, and both of these, by commixtion and secret conjunction, makes one mercury, which they name aquavits, which mercury at last they decoct into gold, not vulgar, but far more noble, which falls upon all imperfect metals, and tings them into tried gold, exposed to all trials. You understand, therefore, as I believe, that though our stone be of gold alone, yet it is not vulgar gold. That therefore our gold may be fetched from vulgar gold, it is to be dissolved into water, not elementary, but not wetting the hands. That is mineral, which water is mercury, which from a red servant hath means in itself to perfect the whole work without any imposition of hands, and this at last is that only true and natural principle to which nothing is to be added, nothing taken away, unless some superfluities, which without any humane help itself will perfect, by its own virtue and natural instinct. Therefore, thou having this mercury, mind nothing else. With good reason, therefore, the philosopher said, employ thy whole study in decocting mercury. But I say to thee, let thy whole study be employed in getting this mercury, that is, in deal-baiting our red laton, which being done, thou hast done thy part. What remains is the work of women and the play of boys. For nature will be present to dispatch the rest, but in the meanwhile a desired rest is given to thee, which indeed, as the philosopher said, is more desirable than any labour. For know that our albification is no light work, being radical, for this will be the indicium of an altered and reduced body. Neither will gold so albificated ever return to its pristine form, for from a body it is made a spirit, and from a fixed, volatile, by this operation. Therefore be wholly intent in deal-baiting laton, for it is easier to make gold than so to destroy it, for he that dissolves so congeals it rather, for the solution of the body and the coagulation of the spirit are coincident in it. But consider you, sons of wisdom, and note these mysteries. That which dissolves is a spirit, but that which coagulates is a body. Therefore, if you would dissolve your body, first of all, you have need of a spiritual substance, because a body cannot dissolutively enter a body, but a spirit entereth it, attenuating and rarefying, and because you require water, therefore you have need of water to manifest this. For every agent exercising any act upon any thing assimilates that on which it acts to itself as far as it can be done, and every natural effect is conformed to the nature of the efficient. Therefore, to draw water out of the earth you have need of water. I don't mean, as some badly think, by water, aqua fortis, aqua regis, and other corrosives, which common alchemists artificially compound to themselves, and put them to dissolve these metallic species, which yet they don't dissolve, but corrode, foul and corrupt, for who would believe that those waters can destroy the old form of the metal, under conservation of a metallic species, which yet themselves are aliens from a metallic nature? For they are not sufficient enough to destroy throughly the species, else they would convert them into their own nature, but as far as they can, they do transform them into some sordid thing, for the more bodies are corroded, the more they are estranged from a metallic nature. But our water is water of mercury, and dissolves bodies into mercury, and inseparably is joined with them, being dissolved, cohabitates, and is concocted, that from them may be made that one or spiritual thing which is sought. For everything that anything naturally dissolves, that so the species of the thing dissolved may be preserved, remains with the thing dissolved, materially and formally, and does coalesce, and is inspissated by it, and nourishes it, as a body may see in a grain of wheat, which being dissolved by a terrene humid vapour, this vapour remains with this grain after dissolution for its radical humidity, and coalesces with it into a plant. Another thing also will be to be observed in every natural dissolution, which, since such like dissolution is the enlivening of a dead thing, can be done by nothing else than that living thing which was of the essence of the dead thing before it was dead, as in a grain the life is dead, as I may say, which we would have vivified. This can be done therefore by nothing else but the vapour of the earth, the humidity and calidity of the air, For that the grain itself was extracted out of the earth, and formerly was nothing else but such like vapour, which afterwards became dead by decoction, therefore by this alone naturally to be vivified, under the conservation of its species. Therefore I write this, because so many and so learned men are so much deceived with that vulgar mercury, for although it is a mineral water, yet not of a like nature or essence with gold. For who will not confess that if a grain of wheat be cast into a pool of water, it will not germinate nor increase, yet bulrushes are wont to vegetate there? Whence is this, I pray? Except that the aqueous humour was not essential to it, neither of a like nature with the wheat, wherefore it doth not naturally dissolve it, but destroys it, not otherways gold, if it be mixed to be decocted with common quicksilver, or any other mercury, except alone of its own humidity, it doth not receive a dissolution in them, to wit, because these waters, being too crude, cold, and unclean, are of a far unlike nature with gold, wherefore in these it is not amended, neither retained, neither with these matured into a far more noble perfection than its nature. Therefore, at length, our mercury is not vulgar mercury, for it is a pure water, clean, clear, bright, and resplendent, and worthy of much admiration. It is crude, cold, and immature, if compared with Sol. But in respect of common mercury digested, warm, and mature, which has no qualities like to this, except alone in whiteness of colour, and of its form of flux, in which, notwithstanding there, is a great difference. But lastly, that you may well understand what our water is, by circumstances I tell thee, and that moved with charity, that it is living, running, clear, shining, white like snow, hot and moist, airy, vaporous and digesting, in which gold is melted like ice in warm water. In this is contained the whole regimen of fire and sulphur which exist, but predominates not. This is indeed the keeper of our gates, the bath of the king and his queen, daily warming, and that incessantly, and yet is taken elsewhere than from the matter, and is distinguished from the whitening substance of the water, yet joined and appearing under the same form of flux and the same colour. This is that heat of the lamp, which, if it be temperate, every day will circumact the matter, until by calcination the humidity being drying a second fire of ashes is produced, in which the vessel or water is hermetically shut and sealed, according to the saving of the philosopher, take a vessel, strick it with a sword, take its life. This is the closure. Therefore this our water is our vessel, and in that our furnace dwells secretly, whose fire ought to be moderate, lest the whole work be destroyed, yet strong enough, lest the life despond for want of heat. Therefore, in this water the whole secret of our vessel consists. Also the structure of the hidden furnace is founded in the composition of this water, in the knowledge whereof all our fires, all our weights, all our regimens lie hid. This water is the clear bright fountain in which our king is to be washed, that he may overcome all his enemies of this water and its preparation. Be careful, because surely without any other help, except the apposition of a perfect purged and cleansed body, nature will make from hence our most secret stone. And I say to thee, in truth, that this water is mineral, pure and clean. Neither can it be extracted elsewhere, but out of those things alone in which it is by nature. And the things out of which it is immediately drawn are most secret above all others. Also the means of extracting it is most wonderful, also its virtues stupendous. For it doth dissolve Sol without violence, and is made friendly to it, and it washeth him from all his foulness. It is white, warm, and clear, therefore praised be the Most High, who hath created this mercury, and given it a nature overcoming all others. For certainly the work of alchemy would be in vain and useless without this water. But consider thou what this water is, and learn from the work as I have done. For having this mercury thou hast the key of the whole art, with which thou mayest unlock all the most secret things of philosophers. Therefore our water is of a like nature with gold, of an unlike substance, in the making of which there is a great stink. Consider therefore, and deeply weigh the possibility of nature, and do not mix any heterogeneous thing, for nature is only amended by its own nature, and by no other. But if you do not yet understand, do not blame me, for I have sincerely, as far as it is lawful for a man to speak, expounded to you the whole matter, that therefore you may understand the conclusion of the matter. Be very attentive. Our stone is made out of one thing, and 4 mercurial substances, whereof one is mature, the rest crude but pure, of which 2 are drawn out of a mineral by the third, but wonderfully joined with a temperate, not violent fire, and so cocted every day, until all be made one by a natural conjunction, most secret, not manual. Afterwards, the fire being changed, let it be digested with the fire daily increasing, at first more moderate, and so every day increased until these volatiles are fixed by a sulphur of their own kind, fixed and incombustible, until the whole compound possess the same nature, fixity, and colour. For then it securely resists the fire, and this is the most powerful power of power, overcoming every subtle and penetrating every solid thing, the virtue of which, being turned into earth, appears complete. But there are, that I may describe the thing particularly, manifold degrees of this our process, in number 12, all which I will briefly run over, the first whereof is called calcination. Of calcination. And calcination is the first purgation of the stone, the exsication of the humidity by the virtue of the natural heat of our water, stirred up by the external heat, from whence the composition is turned into calx or powder of a black colour, yet unctuous, and retaining the radical humidity. The final cause of this calcination is, that the solution may be the better induced to the stone, which without this cannot be had, for gold is a very fixed body, neither can it be immediately dissolved by our water, except only in part, that is, be made soft, incrudated and albificated, in which albification 2 natures appear, volatile and fixed, which we liken to 2 dragons or serpents. Wherefore, that a full dissolution may be made, there is need of contrition, that the body by calcination may be made spongeous and viscous, because then at last it is fit for dissolution. The second final cause is this, that we reconcile contrary qualities, for whilst they fight, they are unprofitable unto us. For in the first conjunction, our water distinguishes between sulphur and mercury, volatile and fixed, and these are enemies to one another, and different things, but it is our part to bring them to a union. But contrary qualities are not reconciled, but by a medium. There are therefore in our first operation 4 contrary qualities, heat, cold, dryness, and humidity, of which 2, hot and dry, are attributed to sulphur, cold and humid to mercury. Therefore they are opposed diametrically, the heat of sulphur and the cold of mercury, also the humidity of mercury and siccity of sulphur. To reduce these contraries to friendship cannot be done without a medium, but the medium must be partaker of both, also suited to both. Would we therefore reconcile cold and heat, the medium will be by siccity, which may be joined to both heat and cold, by turning therefore the composition into earth. Heat and cold agree in this third thing, that they may dwell together. To wit, the degree being abated, but afterwards being dissolved into water, also 2 other enemies are reconciled, siccity and humidity, by the frigidity of water, so that now one is made of 2 by the conjunction, made after a natural separation. But the efficient of this calcination is the operation of heat upon moisture, turning everything that resists it into most subtile powder. But the moving instrument is the fire contrary to nature, which is hid in our dissolving water, stirring up heat in the body, and digesting the humidity into a viscous and unctuous powder. But that this operation is prior to dissolution, take these reasons. It is prior, because a certain solution is made, as I may so say, by our divine water. Therefore the congelation of our spirit will be expected in the next place, because spirits are always congealed after the dissolution of the body, for they have the same operation. Such therefore as the solution is, such the congelation is to be expected after it. Then the order of nature requires this, for a woman exerciseth her dominion first, then it is necessary to be overcome by her husband, but the woman retains her whole domination in the water. This, therefore, will be the first work of the man exerting his power to overcome that in which the woman possesseth both her qualities, which being done, he will easily subject to himself that, in which she hath only one quality. Lastly, heat is not consequentially joined necessarily to any quality, but siccity will always be the end of heat, from whence it appears that the man ought first to exert his power. Therefore calcination is rightly called the beginning of the work. Therefore calcination is the head of the work, for without this will neither be commiction or union. This, therefore, is to be done in the first days of thy stone, for in the first dealbation the body is reduced into its first principles, sulphur and mercury, of which the first is fixed, the other volatile. Therefore are compared to two serpents, or dragons, the one winged, shewing its volatile nature, the other without wings, denoting fixity. Both these coming from one fountain tends to one thing, therefore is likened to a serpent taking his tail in his mouth, to shew that sulphur is nothing without the substance of mercury, nor mercury without the substance of sulphur, but that this mercurial sulphur and sulphurous mercury perfect the whole art. Therefore it is deservedly called one composition, that although it appears twofold in the beginning of the work, whence it is called rebus, yet by conjunction they may be made one and the same, and this is called one elixir, which never would be possible unless they were quite of the same nature. Therefore the nature of sulphur and mercury is diligently to be observed, and we must take care of errors, for these two are not contrary things, but one and the same sulphurial mercury, mature and digested, and mercurial sulphur, crude and immature. Therefore that divine kind of generation will be necessary to be observed, to wit, how nature has operated procreating metallic bodies in the mines under the earth, because we do all things in our work in imitation thereof, as near as can be. Therefore we choose the same matter which she hath made use of, although art has found out a far more subtile way to the abbreviation of the work, and the more than perfect exaltation of the stone. For in metallic veins one thing alone is found, viz. Mercury, which is very crude and frigid, and in which the sulphurial quality altogether is unactive. Also no digestive heat is found there, but by an imperceptible motion after a long time, by little and little. This metallic principle is changed, until at last it be converted to fixed sulphur, for that whilst it remained frigid and humid it was called mercury. In this elevation or excitation it is named sulphur. But the matter is otherways in this our work, for besides mercury crude and cold we have another thing, to wit, mature gold, in which act more active qualities exist. This therefore we join to our mercury, in which passive qualities are found, that the one may relieve the other, and that which nature, helped by no heat, hath digested in the mines, we, having a double fire, digest, whence it comes to pass that we don't make simply gold, but some other thing much more noble and excellent than gold. You see therefore what sulphur is, what mercury, how also we have a double sulphur and a double mercury in our art, which yet are not distinct in essence, but in maturity and perfection. Also you understand, as I think, after what manner they are worked, since the perfect body of gold is incrudated by our divine water, not wetting the hands, and it is reduced to its first principles, to wit mercury, which is not without sulphur, participating of the natures of the luminaries. Therefore in this operation the woman ascends upon the man, and predominates over him for a time, which indeed is unnatural, till the man begins to exert his power, and then first of all by his siccity bringing heat, does execrate the humidity of the woman, by converting all into a most subtile and viscous powder, from which powder by solution water is afterwards dissolved, in which water is the spirit of the dissolvent and dissolved. The man and the woman are joined together. But the excited heat doth not here find a bound, but as yet works every day by separation, by distinguishing between the subtile and the gross, that the first may swim at the top, the latter may subside. So long till all are of the same quality, and then at length in the hour of their nativity they are inseparably conjoined, and the man ascends upon the woman, and impregnates her. At length she brings forth the cloud which she hath conceived, in which she putrefies and is corrupted, and afterwards both of them ascend or arise again glorious, not now divided, but made one and the same by conjunction, and are so coagulated, sublimed, cybated, and exalted into a most perfect nature, and multiplied in weight and goodness of quality according to your discretion, whose excellent use will be proved, as well in projection as in medicine. Therefore these black and stinking ashes are not to be despised, since in them the diadem of our king is contained, and I tell you in all truth that whiteness will never be had unless you make it black. For unless the body putrefies, it will remain without fruit. But if it be corrupted, then indeed thou shalt see them arising from thence, where it seemed they had lost their bodies which they had, and they will appear that which they never were before. Honour you, therefore, the sepulchre of our king, for unless you do this, you shall never admire him coming from the east. Therefore you must take care that you don't err in this first entrance, for the work is spoiled unless you be wary here. The common errors in this operation are many and various. Firstly, of them who know not what is to be calcined, but seek the principle of gold-making in extraneous things. Some bring in for their material principle those things which are not of the same imposition with metals, such are borax, alums, atrament, vitriol, arsenic, seeds of plants, wine, vinegar, urine, hair, blood, gums, and the rosins of the earth. Some do endeavour, such is their blockishness, to generate salts of every kind out of the flame. I pass by these, understanding nothing at all in this art. Others, although they work in metals, yet desire to perfect calcination, either with corrosive waters, spirit of salt, sulphur, or fire, and do indeed corrode the bodies, not calcine them. For this calcination is not made by the native calidity of the body, helped by a friendly heat, but by a corrosive force of waters, without any propensity of the metal to it. Therefore metals are fouled and dissipated, and so estranged from a metallic nature, but not naturally calcined. Therefore every calcination which is made elsewhere than in the perfect body of gold is vain and unuseful to our work. Also every calcination of sol, in which a dissolution, without laying on of hands, does not follow, is false and vain. Therefore this our calcination is necessarily to be made by mercury, which being joined to gold, a due weight, proportion both of quantity and quality being observed, softens it, and takes away the solidity and incrudates it, and by its internal heat, joined with the outward heat of Vulcan, stirs up that native heat of the gold, which being stirred up, acts upon the humidity and exsicates it into a subtile powder, viscous and black. And this is the true key of the work, to incrudate the mature by the conjunction of an immature, being incrudated, to calcine it, being calcined to dissolve it, philosophically, not vulgarly. The signs of this our calcination are these. First, after the body shall be satiated with water, as soon as the keeper of the gates shall stir up the heat of the bath, the water begins to be obscured, or that which was a splendid composition before, then it visibly grows turgid, and swells, ascending and descending continually, until the whole at last become a viscous and fat powder, in which it appears that the humidity is conserved in this operation, otherwise the labour would be in vain. From thence, therefore, it is easily resolved into mineral water, which is the last and most certain signe that our calcination has been true and philosophical. For as soon as the heat begins to operate, the frigid and humid, being impatient thereof, goes to the top. From thence it melts and descends, and so reduceth it, as much as may be, to its own similitude, doing this daily until at last the whole be resolved into fat, and as it were glutinous water, for so our operations are concatenated, that one is the cause and beginning of another, neither can one be had or understood without another. But we, that we may instruct the sons of art more fully, and drive away the unworthy, as far as may be from this art, do handle, as it were, divers operations, when there is but one recipe, one thing, one regimen, and successive disposition to black, white, and red, neither are we to be understood otherwise. Wherefore every one that will truly be a philosopher should regard the sense, not the letter of writers in this art. But that we may come to our true calcination, these things are to be considered that follow. Firstly, that thou should get our mercury, without which nothing is done in this art. See then that thou be not deceived in that. Common mercury, which is altogether unuseful to our work, for if thou work in it to thy dying day, thou wilt find nothing in it. Secondly, thou must take care that the fire of the furnace be not too intense, but let it be clibanically measured, which that thou mayest. Fully understand, know, that the sulphur which predominates not in the mercury or water digests the matter, which together with azoth is abundantly sufficient for thee. Let not therefore its internal quality confound the external form. Then be not solicitous about the manner of making the fire, only have a care that it be not too gentle, for then thou wilt easily despond for want of heat. Nor yet let it be over-violent, but of a moderate degree, according to the nature of the bodies, and exclusive of cold take. These things, on the other hand, concerning the internal and natural fire, I call that internal which increaseth the work in the end. Thirdly, be careful of the quantity, that thou dost not put so much to be drunk by Leighton that he cannot afterwards eat, for if thou shalt put on too much, there will be a sea of trouble. If too little, it will be burnt into smoke. Be not therefore covetous or prodigal, between the extremes keep a mean. Therefore, in joining the male with his female, remember that it behoves the activity of sulphur to execrate the superfluous humidity of mercury. Therefore do not drown the active with too much. Crude sperm the woman will also desire to rule, therefore do not choke the humidity of thy stone with too much earth, but with discretion mix it sweetly, and according to the exigence of nature, lest the virtue of the stone be diminished, make therefore an amalgama, not as the goldsmith does, with 4 or 5 parts of water, but as the philosophers do, with a double or treble to the last. But it is better to take 3 to 4 than 1 to 2, since the solution will be better, because the calcination will be more natural. Ripley witnesseth with me that by how much the more earth, says he, and less water thou take, so much the better solution shalt thou make. In the first place, therefore, beware that your land be not overwhelmed with waters, because the fire is hidden in the earth, which will not operate if there be too much humid superfluity, whence the error will be incorrigible, and the work vain. Fourthly, be careful of the closure of the vessel, lest the spirits should fly out and the work be destroyed. Keep therefore the vessel and its ligature, nor look upon this to be of little moment. Consider therefore man, who as he is generated by nature, so also our gold is matured by art helped by nature. Therefore consider with how great care nature has shut the womb of a pregnant woman, lest anything should either get in or pass out. Otherwise the fetus would perish. With no less industry, be thou cautious in perfecting this philosophical work, lest thy labour be in vain. Hear therefore the philosopher, saying, Take a vessel and fire, strike it with a sword, take the life, this is the closure. Hermes also says, The vessel of the philosophers is their water, and know for certain that the vessel of nature is only fit for us in this art, which diligently is to be shut. For in forming the embryo there are very great winds, which if they should vanish, we are undone, for the error is irreparable, whence the damage is most certain. The work in the 5th place is patience, that thou don't despond or study to make the solution too speedy, but firmly believe that too much hast is the greatest enemy to conjunction, and hinders it for the body to be dissolved. Impertinently rubifies, stirring up a fever, that is, a fire against nature, whence, being struck, as it were, with the hammer of death, it becomes impertinently passive from active, and instead of black, it appears citrine, like a wild poppy. But our true calcination conserves the radical humidity in the body to be dissolved, and it is finished in no other colour but black. and becomes a discontinuous calx, unctuous, fat, and 136 fit for fusion. Be therefore patient, that thou mayest obtain thy desire, because you will have very much cause of despair. When therefore we speak of our operations, do not think that we perfect them in 1 or 2 days, or see the colours or signs in the first hour. No, verily, but we have expected much and long, till there was made an agreement betwixt contrary qualities. Wherefore Trevisan teaches in his practice, who was a learned and good man in this art, that he stayed in prison, that is, suspense of mind and doubt, 40 days, but that he returned afterwards, and saw clouds and mists. Moreover, if thou should put grain into good land, thou shalt not look into the earth, by moving it every hour, that you may see whether and how much it begins to increase. If you should do this, you could not expect a sweet vegetation, much less fruit from thence. So foolish and insipid are they who, as soon as ever they have joined the dissolvent with the dissolvent, presently seek some signs of the operation, nor can satisfy themselves, but they either move or open, or add, or detract something, or at least increase the fire to accelerate the work, and so by this means hinder the work of nature, and therefore do not attain the wished for ends. Therefore attend to my doctrine. As soon as thou hast prepared the matter, that is, mature sulphur yellow, with his crude white sulphur, and hast duly espoused them, shut them up in a vessel, and let them stand without trouble. If thou rightly proceed, within 24 hours, thou shalt see thy compound swelling, and perhaps sending forth some bubbles, by reason of the heat of thy sea-water, striving to excite the heat of the included matter. But in the first entrance thou shalt behold the variation of the colours slowly, as at least it will seem to thee, because then the keeper of the gate necessarily sustains many labours, because whatever is done, he alone then does it, because the bath is not yet prepared, that is, the natural heat of the king is not yet stirred up. But when the bath is made hot, a housekeeper shall sustain but few labours, and the operations will be easily to be distinguished. Therefore let the sons of this art know for certain that the first colour that will appear, after the silver colour of the amalgama of the body, will not be perfect black. For this colour does not come in a moment, but every day the more the whiteness is diminished, the more blackness will supervene, until at last it be completed. For blackness is a signa of a dissolved body, which is not made in 1 hour, but by little and little, but incessantly. For the tincture proceeding from the rains of Sol and Luna shews itself black to the eyes, but is extracted insensibly and imperceptibly. Therefore, the coming of blackness and the departure of the tincture out of the bowels of the dissolvent body is the same measure and term of time, because as soon as the tincture is wholly gone out, so soon the blackness will be perfect and absolute. Concerning this, hear what Ludus Puerorum says. First, by how much the more thou decocts, so much the more thou subtiliseth the gross, and blackens the compound. And Bernard Trevisan saith, the earth of the rest beginning to predominate, the blackness of the element appears, but does not obtain his dominion, but by little and little. To finish in a word, there are only 4 principal colours, the first whereof is blackness, and that most slow in coming, and longest in duration, which if it were made perfect, by a momentary ingress, the work would be most expeditious, for it should not perish more slowly than it came, and remain in the top of blackness for an hour, for there is no interstitium in these operations, but it increaseth to the height of 1 degree, at which it no sooner arrives, but decreases again. Therefore it ascends slowly to blackness, and descends slowly from it. There is not a moment in which it doth not ascend or descend, for nothing resteth but in its end. But blackness is not the end of our stone, ego on si. How then shall blackness appear? To wit, even as night comes, for first the twilight, at last dark night, and that by insensible degrees, every moment there being less light in the air than another, until at last there be no light at all, then it is deep night. But all this wont to be within an hour. Yet the motion is insensible, but our work, because it requires a longer time, the motion must needs be more imperceptible. Thou therefore that seekest this, consider the example produced. and thou shalt have thy answer. Objection: but after the first excitation of the matter, the tincture goes out every hour and moment, but the colour of the tincture going out is blackest blackness. Therefore, after the first stirring up of the matter, blackest blackness will appear in an hour. We answer, the blackest blackness is of the tincture gone out, but not of the going out. Or, if so, yet it goes out insensibly, but insensible blackness. Although most black, when it goes into much white, will not manifest the blackest blackness in the whole compound, but a whitish colour. But if so be the subject of whiteness be not subtile and well depurated, even as this white is now, then its tincture, in its first egress, is not completely black, but it obtains this by a putrefaction, which is not a bare egress of the tincture, but a repugnance and resistance from it, which ariseth between the outgoing tincture and the extracting water, that is, between sulphur and mercury. Concerning this thing, hear the saying of Morianus, our operation is nothing else but an extracting of water out of its earth, nor that only, but a returning of the water upon the earth, until the earth putrefy. Therefore the tincture is not altogether black of itself, but most white, because by how much the more the tincture goes out, which is the soul, by so much the more the earth, which is the body, is dispirited, and so it putrefies and blackens. How long time, then, must we expect before it be perfectly black? In this thing attend to what Flamel says, the colour which thou ought first to see is blackness, and that not every, but most black, and that within the space of 40 days. Also, Ripley says, suffer the commixed and coequated natures to lie together 6 weeks, which time expect with a slow fire. When the colours die, they will show it, for at that time they will boil like liquid pitch, and will putrefy. And Bernard, in his parable, says, the king, putting off his splendid robes, gives the silken ones to Saturn, being clothed in black, which he retains 40 days. All this understand of blackness in its height, which is plain from the above-repeated words of Flamel, but a more remiss blackness, will appear sooner. So the Scala Philosophorum says, within 16 days in the degree of putrefaction, an easy fire being kept, the matter will be continually covered with blackness, and this either later or sooner, according to the ingenuity of the operator in adapting the matters. But whether will intermedial colours appear in a progress from white to black, as in the progress from black to white? It seems so, because there is no transition from one extreme to another, unless by mediums, and we answer that they so appear, although indeed confusedly, and some in some works will appear in a progress to the height of blackness, which perhaps will not appear in another, because they are only accidental colours, but not altogether the same, betwixt the first whiteness and blackness, which are between this and ultimate whiteness, because there is not the same reason of matter. In the former, the thick terrestrial matter was to be burned and purified, but in this work the matter is more spiritual and pure. Therefore, in a pure or depurated subject, in a progress from the extremity of blackness to the extremity of whiteness, the intermedial colours will be much more clear and admirable than those which appeared in an earthly subject. But in both progresses they will appear, in the former transition between the extremes, 144 obscura, fewer and fouler, in the latter more shining and splendid. Witness the Philosopher, after the hath of blackness before whiteness, in the hour of conjunction, great miracles will appear, for whatever colours could be thought on in the whole world then will be conspicuous. And Reply says, in our work colours will appear, then which never more fair appeared. Also, before perfect blackness, the intermedial colours will show themselves. Witness the Philosopher, who, painting the colours of the dragons, saith, they are black, yellow, and azure, and these intermedial colours, says he, denote that thy confections are not yet perfectly putrefied. In a word, the various colours in dyeing will appear more obscure, but thin and few, and this, before black night, obnubilate the whole horizon. But in rising again, very many and very splendid ones will arise, because the body now begins to be glorified, and the light to predominate over the darkness, and this in a depurated and spiritual subject. But in what order will these foresaid colours appear? This truly cannot be determined, because they are varied many ways, but the better the juice of the water of life shall be, the better the signs shall appear. The order of the 4 principal colours is described by all, but no one can determine the order of the accidental ones. Let it suffice thee if within 40 days thou hast a complete. Blackness. Don't mind other things much, but it is good to attend, for blackness is first especially desirable, and though others appear, unless thou seest this, without doubt thou hast erred. But as I said, other colours are not to be despised, except the venereal or imperfect red, which if it appear before blackness is to be suspected, especially when the sixity of the compound and discontinuity of the parts accompany it. I say this precipitation is a fatal index to the operator of his lost time. This same thing the philosopher witnesses, saying, "A vehement fire hinders conjunction, and tinges white with the colour of the wild poppy." And Flamel in his hieroglyphical figures says, "Unless thou shalt behold the blackest black of black, whatever other colour thou seest, thou art in the way of error." But especially a reddish colour is to be suspected, for if thou seest that, thou hast burned, or art burning the lively virtue of the stone. But I must stay no longer in these things, since one water does all this, so that the internal compound continually be ruled with external heat. Neither is there anything in the whole work more wonderful than this our water, which I have fully described above, to which place I send thee back. Concerning solution. And the dissolution of our stone is the reduction of it into its first matter, the manifestation of the humid, and the extraction of natures from their profundity, which is finished by bringing them into a mineral water. This operation is of no light work or moment, for how hard it is, those that have toiled in it can attest. The Fountain of Chemical Philosophy, written in Latin by Eirenaeus Philalethes, printed in the year 1694. Tract, The Fountain of Chemical Philosophy. I will divide the whole of the art into these parts. The first shall contain things substantially and essentially constituting the work, the second the disposition of them. The things essentially constituting the stone are a body or mature sulphur, or red brass and water, or immature mercury, or white brass, to which a vessel is added, a furnace and triple fire. The disposition of these things considers the weight and the regimen. The pondus is twofold, the regimen twofold. Those things which perfect these operations are calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, putrefaction, distillation, coagulation, sublimation, fixation, and exaltation, of which the 2 first are made especially by a temperate incomburent and altering ignition of the fire, heating the king's bath, and changing him first into a subtile viscous earth, discontinued black and stinking, then into mineral water diversely coloured, and this is called a fire against nature. The 3 operations which follow are made from the combining of the first and third fire, to wit, of the natural and contranatural, which being so joined together, make an unnatural fire, by circulating the matter every day, and separating the more subtile from the thick, till all be of the same temperament, and then conjoining the things separated, impregnating them, and so putrefying them. The 5 last operations are made by the fire of nature, daily increasing and predominating, which first circumacts the putrefied matter daily, and cleanseth it from filth by an often ascension and descension, which therefore is called distillation, volatilization, ablution, mundification, cohobation, imbibition, libation, humectation of the earth. And this is done so long by the heat, until the sixity begins to coagulate, which is called inspissation, which by a longer concoction or sublimation brings a fixity, whose bound is exaltation. This is not the change of an inferior place for the superior, but of the most vile thing, to make the most noble. These are all our operations and successive dispositions, which by some are called so many regimens, which name if any one had rather impose, he may, however, know there is only a double fire, natural and against nature, of which the latter acts first, because the other is not brought to light, but by this And putrefaction must go before regeneration, and when these two fight with one another, they make an unnatural fire, and from this contention rises putrefaction. And after this is a glorious regeneration, in which the sulphur and water become one thing, and also receive a congelation, from no fire but a natural. Therefore our body, which is commonly called terra lemnia, perfects the whole work, but it can in no wise be moistened but in its own water, which water is truly pluvial, not such as the common people knows to get, but ours, which none ever saw, but a true philosopher. Believe me, for I speak the truth, fools know how to extract many waters, to wit, wetting the hands. But our water is the life of all things, about which thou must take pains, then neither Sol nor Luna will be wanting to supply thee with riches. But I will tell thee, and that faithfully, what kind of water this is. It is the water of saltpetre, which is known as mercury, but in the heart a pure infernal fire. But have a care thou be not deceived by quicksilver, but understand that mercury, which the returning sun diffuseth everywhere in the month of March. Gather thou it in the month of October, because then surely it is found ripe, and the most precious treasure in the whole world. But that I may describe our mercury to thee, our rain-water, so that thou mayst find it, know that it is before the eyes of the whole world, that yet are ignorant thereof, or at least does take the vulgar for it, and detupates it with various tortures, but neglects our true mercury in its season, therefore it never perfects our magistery. For the common alchemists does look upon it with a blue look, whence it comes to pass that they scorn it, but it astonisheth the sons of learning with its splendour, and is greatly accounted of by them. Therefore it is a vile thing, and yet the most precious, which no one ever contemned without a great judgment of God. But thou, when thou seest it, don't despise it, because it will appear very dirty, and if thou therefore despise it, thou shalt be deprived of the magistery. But if thou dost greatly esteem this contemptible thing, then indeed it shall seem glorious, having changed its countenance. For our water is a most clean virgin, and is loved by many, but she meets all her wooers clothed in sordid garments, that by this means she may distinguish philosophers from fools, for whosoever shall behold nothing but externally will scorn him as unworthy of such a secret. Since whores shew themselves to their wooers, dressed in splendid garments, but this chaste and most precious maid seems outwardly foul, but is inwardly fair, which indeed cheats many fools. But whatsoever mental man can see the spirit which lies hid under the patent body will not esteem her little. Also our virgin will look upon him as a friend, and, putting off her filthiness, will shine most amiable, whom then none but a fool but must admire and love, for she will bestow upon him infinite riches and perfect health. Therefore honour ye this female, the sister and wife of our king, to whom, if you be assistant in putting off her dregs, she will get most splendid garments for herself, and bestow infinite riches upon thee. Therefore this our queen is clean above measure, whom if you shall behold, you will think you look upon a certain heavenly body, for she is indeed the heaven or the fifth essence of philosophers, whose brightness you cannot imagine, unless you see it. Believe me, for I have seen her snowy splendour with my eyes, touched with my hands, than which nothing can be thought fairer. Our water is then truly pontic, serene, crystalline, pure and clean, which is not so in its nature as we make it by our art, and it's our sea, our hidden fountain, out of which our gold naturally is created, when yet it prefers itself to gold and conquers it. And in the hour of its nativity, gold is joined with it, and is washed in it, and both increaseth together into a stout hero, which neither Caesar nor the Pope can buy with money. Therefore, with all thy strength get this water, of which an ounce is worth above £1,000, because by this alone, without any other labour, except the addition of a perfect, clean, pure body, thou mayest perfect our most honoured stone, to which no treasure in the world can be equalled. But there is need of profound meditation before thou canst conceive our sea, to wit its flux and reflux. But if thou be diligent, by the help of God, thou shalt obtain thy desire. I, for my part, after I knew the field in general, where this our secret fountain did, pearl, yet I did not learn to get it out, till after a year and a half, giving myself to daily study and profound contemplations, because the fiery furnace of the wise men lay hid from me long, but after I knew this, and how it was fitted to its proper vessel, after a few days I beheld the admirable brightness of our water, which being seen I could not but be amazed, for as in the practice, so it is in the theory, and on the contrary, for he that exactly knows the majesty of this water, no words or secrets of the philosophers, sayings, writings, or enigmas will be concealed from him. So whosoever hath once made up our water, nothing remains to be done but to cast in a clean body in a just quantity, shut the vessel, and so let it stand till the complement of the work. But we have another twofold fire, which thou sat ease why now, as soon as thou hast learned this first, but that we may return to the water, in which, believe me, the whole secret consists, which water although it be one, yet is not simple but compound, to wit of the vessel and fire of philosophers, to which a third is added, namely, the bond. When therefore we speak of our vessel, understand our water. When of the fire, in like manner understand water, and when we dispute of the furnace, we would have nothing diverse or divided from the water. Therefore the vessel is one, the furnace one, the fire one, and all these are one to wit water. Therefore the fire digesteth, the vessel whiteneth, and penetrates, and the furnace or bond encompasseth and includeth all, and the fire is mercury, the vessel also mercury, lastly the same. Furnace is mercury, and note well, there is no fire in the whole work but mercury, when notwithstanding the fire is manifold, and the water manifold, therefore as well fire, is diversified by their virtue, in the work, as in number, so they agree in one and the same gender, to therefore our fire is living, our water living, our vessel living, our furnace living, and all these are one. Know also, dearest, that there is only one thing in the whole world, in the which this our mercury is to be found. It is of a like essence with gold. Unlike in substance, by converting the elements thereof, thou shalt find what thou seekest. Join the heaven with the earth upon a fire of friendship, and in the midst of the firmament thou shalt see Hermes his bird. Do not confound the natures, but divide them and join them again, and thou shalt reign in honour all thy life. Hear therefore this great secret. In the southern coast is found a very high mountain, very near to the sun, which is one of the seven, and highest but one. This mountain of which we now speak is of a very hot temperature, because it is not far from the sun, and in this mountain a vapour or spirit is shut up, which is highly necessary for our work, but it does not ascend unless it be enlivened, neither is enlivened unless the earth be digged knee-deep in the top of the mountain. But if this be done, the spirit or thin exhalation ascends, which being congealed by the air, drop by drop, runs into most clear water, warm like a bath, which is presently gathered, for it is the true caduce of mercury, with which he works wonders. This is our water, our fire, our furnace, and it is our mercury, and not the vulgar's, but the hot and humid liquor of the most pure salt, which we name mercury, because, comparing it with his sun, it's immature and frigid. Verily I say unto thee, except the Almighty had created this mercury, the transmutation of metals were impossible, because the sun does not tinge unless it be tinged. But he is not tinged but by this, our water alone. Oh, this blessed humidity, which is the philosophical heaven, whence wise men have drawn their inestimable dainties. Oh, permanent water, dissolving and amending soul, our nitre and wonderful saltpetre, whose price is inestimable, yet it is little esteemed. Therefore the thing is vile and yet very precious, whom our soul loves as his only bride, whose virtue, if the vulgar knew, they would not sell a drachm for 1,000 ounces of silver, for it is most precious gold, lively and penetrating. Therefore it turns the body of gold into a mere spirit, and is joined in marriage, as the woman to the husband whose fairness Sol admires and rejoices in her, and for love kills his own wife. And she, moved with love, makes him alive, and is impregnated by him, conceives and grows big, also brings forth a son, a most serene king. O happy they who can go to this fountain of our water, for if they shall drink of it, and shall eat afterwards a little piece of fat flesh, they shall reign as princes all their life on the earth. Therefore the whole secret of our work consists in knowing this our sea, which whoever is ignorant of, he hath long ago destined his money to perdition, if he does spend any about this work. For our ocean draws its original from one mountain, and that a very high one, as I have said above. But if ascending to the top thou dig knee-deep, a certain exhalation or white fume will ascend, which will perfect the whole magistry. But there remains another secret, which thou art obliged not to be ignorant of, that thou mayest obtain thy desire, to wit, how thou must dig in the mountain, since that the earth in the superfice of the mountain is to be cut with no blow, for such is his dryness, that it is concreted by the means of heat into a substance harder than flint. Attend therefore to this secret. In Saturnine places is found a certain herb called Saturnia, whose branches appear dry, but juice abounds in the root. Gather this herb together with the root, and carry it with thee, until thou come to the foot of the mountain, under which, by the ministry of Vulcan, thou shalt dig, and bury the herb, which presently goes through the pores of the mountain, by loosing the earth thereof. Then at length, climbing to the top, thou shalt easily bore knee-deep, and shalt pour so much fat and dry water, that descending to the bottom of the mountain it may wet the herb there laid, which presently being made moist, together with the water, ascends like smoke, and hurries with it the spirit of the mountain, carrying it up with it, which spirit is a fiery virtue, mingling itself with the water, and inhabiting therein, and it is the water into which thou hast cast thy bond. Or the vessel or furnace, the spirit of Saturnia, is a whitening fume, and the vapour of the mountain is fire, and all these are fire. So thou hast Saturnia, a vegetable, royal and mineral herb, of which with fat flesh is made such a broth, to which no dainties in the world may be compared. Now thou hast the whole secret of our water, described under an enigmatical discourse, yet not so obscurely, but thou mayest easily, if thou be diligent and learned, by contemplations and experiments perfect the work. For all these are the true material principles of our stone, besides which nothing can or ought to enter into our work, to wit, the king and the water, which is the bath of the king. And know that our water is a vessel, as our king is contained in it, and a furnace, as our fire is included in it, and our fire, as the virtue or spirit of the mountain inhabits in it, and the female, as it contains the vapour of vegetable Saturnia, which is very friendly to Sol, and penetrates, whitens, and mollifies him, and makes him to cast out sperm. Then the fiery virtue, which is shut up in the water, begins to work upon our body so reduced, by wasting it, and mortifying, by burning, and putrefying, or rather exciting to these things, until the innate heat of Sol is deduced from power into act, which dealbates, coagulates, fixeth and tingeth, and therefore our stone is called the world, because it contains both the agent and patient in it. It is the moving and the moved, active and passive, fixed and volatile, mature and crude, one whereof succours the other, and the one is amended by the other, because both is homogeneous in itself. For sulphur and mercury are the same in water and in a body, in identity of the genus, and only are diversified by decoction. Keep this secret. Therefore we do not, to that end, order crude and volatile mercury to be mingled with mature and fixed sulphur, that we might affirm that sulphur is different in one and the other, and the mercury different also, for where would then the homogeneity of metals be, which we affirm in our stone? But therefore we mix these two species, that we by our art might perfect gold 1,000 degrees more in a far shorter space than nature has formed simple gold in the mines. For nature, from only crude, humid, and frigid mercury without any addition, generates gold by a long decoction under the earth, but art to contract the work, throws in mature, and fixed sulphur to mercury made most pure by art, and so extracts the most digested virtue of sulphur by mercury, which sulphureal virtue strongly changes and perfects mercury into a complete elixir. Observe, therefore, the work and the process thereof, whence thou shalt understand the cause of the wonderful abbreviation of the work. Gold is a body hot and dry, lunar cold and moist, mercury the medium of carrying the tinctures. The body of Sol is most digested, of lunar imperfect and immature, mercury the bond, by which these two contraries are united. Join lunar to mercury, with a due and convenient ignition, and mingle them so that lunar and mercury may become one mercury, retaining the fire in itself, and all the feces and superfluities will fall from mercury, and he shall become clear as the tear of the eye, although not diaphanous. Then lastly mingle this mercury with gold, in which is lunar and fire, and then the hot and dry will love the cold and moist, and will lie down together in one bed that is in the fire, of friendship, and the man will be dissolved upon the woman, and the woman will be coagulated upon the man, and then the spirit and the body will be one by commixtion. Go on afterwards with that foot thou hast begun, and so often reiterate the heaven upon its earth, until the spirit put on the body, and both be fixed together. For then our stone is perfect, and endued with regal virtue, the which no price can buy. For mercury is the water of all metals, they being decocted in it, and even as simple water, which in its own nature is cold, and moist, which notwithstanding, if it be mixed in decoction with any vegetable, receives and puts on other qualities of the thing mixed with it, whose force and spirit or life, which resides in the water, goes out by decoction into the water, and the water convertibly receives its nature, yet the thick and corporeal earthly part of the substance decocted is not that spirit that changes the quality of the water, but is separable from the water after decoction. In like manner, we must understand of argent 5, with its species yet differently, for whatsoever metal or mineral shall be so familiar with mercury as to be mixed per minima and decocted with it, that mercury, according to the species of the metal so joined, puts on other qualities and will cast off his own dregs. Therefore, metallic and mineral species are subordinately and subalternately to be decocted in it, and it is their water into which mineral spirits are emitted by decoction, and do alter it no other ways than vegetables decocted in their simple water. Yet a double difference is to be noted between the foresaid decoctions. First, that water is not fixed with the vegetables, as mercury with metals, therefore these are of a stronger composition than those. The second, that in the decoction of vegetables or animals, the water, being a diaphanous humour, not only receives new virtue and qualities, but also a different colour to what it had. But it is not so in mercury, for its nature is altered, but not its colour nor form of flux. But the colour of a dissolved metal lies under the form of liquid argent vive, and by its virtue does not appear. Therefore mercury first acteth upon a metal by dissolving it, afterwards the metal acts upon mercury by coagulating it, and as, in dissolution, the form and colour of the metal lay under the form and colour of mercury, so also in coagulation the form and colour of mercury is hid under the colour and form of the metal. So neither the qualities of the metal in dissolution hinders the flux of mercury, nor the qualities of mercury in coagulation hinder the fixity of the metal. Dost thou not see here a certain wonderful agreement betwixt mercury and metals? For they love like mother and son, sister and brother, male and female. Therefore their bodies are made better by water, for the generation of all things is by water, and they take in it, and by it, a latitude of subtlety, that is a spiritual and volatile nature, and the water in like manner is amended by the bodies, and is retained and puts on a corporeal nature, and so the whole compound is matured together when the agents become patients, and on the contrary. But the reason that the colour of mercury is not changed in decoction by the body dissolved is this, that the earth and water are homogeneous in mercury, and so temperate that neither can be separated from the other, and they are so strongly commixed, that in so wonderful a tenuity of matter there is such great density of substance as to hide the colours, whence if any proportion of mercury be spoiled, either destructively by deturpating things, or generatively with a body appropriated to itself, it will manifest the colour that is thrown into the substance. But there are proportions of mercury in respect both of earth and water. In respect of the second it flows and is liquid. In respect of the first it wets nothing that it touches, but that which is of the unity of its nature. From what hath been said, all errors of operators in mercury are detected, for some obstruct or divide its homogeneity, by drying it with various sublimations, others spoiling and disproportionating the earth to bring in a transparency. As many as do this do nothing but a sophistical work, for mercury is the sperm of metals, which nature with much sagacity hath formed in the veins of the earth. For metal, neither is anything wanting to it but pure digestion, but it is not digested unless by pure metallic incomburent sulphur, which indeed it hath in its centre, by which nature would form gold in a long time, but it is altogether unknown to man how he should make this by his art. For although gold might be made of mercury alone without any addition, yet it would not be perfected but by long time and great cost, which would be foolish to undergo in making simple gold. Therefore, sulphur is the only thing in the world which nature has perfected that is familiar to mercury. This therefore is mixed radically with it, and by this mercury is decocted, and mercury, because of the repugnance of qualities, putrefies it, and so by regeneration it rises again, not gold such as is had in mines, but spiritual penetrative, and tinging insomuch that it easily enters all imperfect metals when cast upon them, which in a very short time it digesteth to the anatical proportion of gold, and the dregs being cast off restores them to perfect health. Thou seest, therefore, that mercury is by no means to be disproportionated from its own nature, but to be matured, and that not by itself without any addition, and yet without any outward addition, but a radical union of a clean body with it per minima, which is done by our secret conjunction. Yet see you be not deceived, for this conjunction is not made by manual operation, but only by a natural, man not only not helping, but also not well understanding its cause. Therefore, this is called a divine work. Fools can confound the body of gold with mercury, and then they call it animated gold, but they find nothing in it. For although these two should remain together 1,000 years, nevertheless they would afterwards recede one from the other in their own proper nature. Therefore the conjunction was not alterative, but only a confusion of two between themselves. But in our operation the spirit of soul infuseth itself into the spirit of mercury, so that they never depart the one from the other afterwards, even as water doth not, being mixed with water. Therefore in this operation the greatest, nay, the whole secret of the art lies hid. Attend therefore, thou son of learning, and see warily that thou dost not err here. Therefore the body of soul will never be joined with mercury inwardly, unless lunar mediating, or an imperfect body and fire, and this lunar is the juice of the water of life, which lies hid in mercury, which is sharpened by the fire, and is a spirit entering a body, and altering it, and compelling it to retain its soul. Now therefore thou seest of what? Mercury. We have hitherto spoken, not vulgar but pluvial, which properly is not called mercury, but mercurial water. For the mercury of the vulgar is water, but a spirit, and fiery virtue is wanting to it. Supply, if thou canst, that which is wanting with all thy art, then it will no longer be mercury of the vulgar, but like to ours. But if thou canst not do this, let that mercury alone, for thou canst expect nothing but loss from it. Behold now, God is my witness, I have told the whole matter, which if thou art wise thou canst not be ignorant of. For vulgar mercury has seduced more than anything else, for the workers herein have found nothing, because they did not know our mercury. But to return to conjunction, which, believe me, is the whole secret of the art, for the earth is not united inseparably with the water, but water adheres strongly to water, hence it follows that this laudable conjunction is not celebrated till after dissolution. Attend thou therefore to solution, and nature will join together. And this dissolution is made in mercury by the help of included lunar and fire. For lunar penetrates and albifies, and the fire mortifies and triturates, but the water includes both these virtues. According to the saying of the philosopher, the fire which one will shew thee is water. And another, unless bodies be subtilized by fire and water, nothing is done in the magistery. O blessed mercury of ours, which frees us from those many labours which sophisters endure. For they make many operations with their hands, and profit nothing, because they know not the true course of nature. But we do nothing, but leave all things to be done by our mercury, which proceeds in a better method, according to its natural instinct, than any man could invent. For he is constrained by the necessity of his end, wherefore he never misses the right way if he be not hindered. But there are some sophistical operators who take gold and put it to mercury, then shut them in a glass and set them over the fire, expecting some notable thing from thence. But since they cast fat and good seed into barren land, they are deceived, for they find not the harvest they expected, because, as is above assayed, and shall be further said more plainly, gold is not the matter of our stone in its whole essence, nor yet mercury. Wherefore the bare mixture of these cannot generate our stone, for gold, in the work, is a male to the work of generation, in whose most secret reigns the seed lies hid, which, if it wants, send forth, being received in a due matrix, and conjoined with the passive female seed, 'tis cherished with a due heat, and cybated with a proper aliment, then truly we shall have from gold abundantly to perform our work. So neither a man, as he is man, can neither be called the father, nor the matter of the embryo, but he has in him such a matter, from which, by the conjunction of a dissimilar spermatic matter, in the same kind, by an apt disposition the infant is formed. In like manner we must understand of gold. For gold is the most perfect of all metals, and the father of our stone, yet it is not the matter thereof, for the sperm which gold sends forth, if it be handled by art, will be the masculine matter of our stone, and is nothing else than a most digested virtue of gold, which is extracted from it by sagacious art, and then is called our living gold, and not vulgar, which is dead. So also in the procreation of man, a man may be said to be dead, respect being had to the act of generation, until he pours out the due matter which he hath in himself into a fit place. Just so 'tis in our art. Therefore our gold is not vulgar gold, for they differ as a father differs from his sperm which he hath. The first is necessary to our work, and living, the other dead and unprofitable. That is, sends forth its seed, which is the active virtue of our stone. So therefore go ye on with a great deal of caution. Take this body which I have demonstrated, and sweetly extract the seed from it. Then, and not till then, this gold, which before was dead, idle and useless, being made living, active and fit for our work, will supply thee with the first matter of our stone, to wit the masculine, and so is no longer called gold by us, but brass, magnesia, lead, dung, nor can it indeed properly be called gold, for gold is a body, but this is a chaos that is a spirit, nor will return by any art to its pristine species of gold, because the body is turned into spirit, from hence saith Menabdes, I order posterity to make bodies incorporate. Hermes also says, O son, extract the shadow from the radius, that is, extract from the gold which is called the radius, its seed which is called the shadow, both because it lies hidden, and, as it were, in a shade, and also because it comes out under an obscure shade of blackness. Aristotle also saith, the first thing that ye ought to do is to sublime the mercury, then cast clean bodies into a clean mercury. But I would have the reader admonished what sort of sublimation is here intended, for there are 1791 infinite false, erroneous, and sophistical operations, one true and natural, which, notwithstanding is done by art, I, omitting all these vulgar operations, follow the intention of the philosophers, and mean that sublimation which they call the preparation of the thin matter, by which the eclipse of the earthy interposition is taken from lunar, that she may receive light from Sol, which comes to pass. When the dark sphere of Saturn, which the whole horizon is vanquished, then Jupiter, obtaining the empire, ascends into the air with a splendid cloud, whence sincere, beautiful, and lovely dew drops upon the earth, which mollifies it, and raiseth great winds in its belly or bosom, which brings our stone upward, whence 'tis endued with heavenly virtue, which falling down again to the earth, which is its nurse, puts on a terrene and corporeal nature, so it receives the force of inferiors and superiors. We conclude, therefore, that neither gold nor mercury can afford us the first matter of our stone until the tincture be extracted from gold, the dissolvent, by mercury, the dissolvent, which tincture is a living active virtue, not dead as gold was before its dissolution. This is the matter of the old philosophers, which we ought to take, which, as the author of the New Light says, is but does not appear until the artist pleaseth, in knowing which all the perfection consists. Wherefore I order you, who ever would be searchers out of this secret, that you would take that which is vile, and manifest to the whole world, out of which, by a wonderful manner, ye shall extract that which is most hidden therein, that is, our menstruum, and the western Mercury is our philosophical field, in which your soul shall arise and ascend, join this with his delectable bridegroom, and let them lie in the bed of love without stirring, until from this hidden nature, which is Mercury regenerated by the philosopher, there proceed a living virtue which may raise the dead. Then comes a royal offspring, of which Sol is the father, and Luna the mother, and so you have a most true explication of the new light. You must take, saith the author, that which is, but is not seen till the artist please, and you must use this for the true matter of the old philosophers. And so we have spoken fully and plainly of our body, and of our water, and of our red sulphur, and white brass. We have said there ought to be added to these a furnace, vessel, and triple fire, note well what, and about what I speak here, for the furnace is of lute, or brick, the vessel glass, and the fire elementary, of which we will speak lower in the last place of this little treatise, concerning our disposition, but here we speak of things essentially and substantially conducing to the work. For the furnace of brick is not wont to be called by us our furnace, nor elementary fire ours, nor the glass vessel ours, for these commonly are common to us and sophisters, and they will excel us often in the curiosity of these externals. But we call those things ours which they neither have nor can have. Verily I say that our fire, our furnace, our vessel are secret, nor obvious, but to philosophers, for they enter into the very essence of our work. Hence a certain philosopher, writing of this fire, says, Behold, the fire which one will show thee is water. Also another witnesseth thus of the vessel of philosophers is their water. Another also writes, The intention of all the philosophers is that all operations should be made in their humid fire, in a secret furnace and vessel, which testimonies plainly enough declare another fire. Vessel and furnace, then, are commonly known. Moreover, my brother, let it not be a cause of scruple to thee, that I have before numbered our furnace, fire, and vessel amongst the things essentially constituting our stone, for in this I follow the intention of all philosophers writing in this art. Concerning this vessel Sendivogus writing, names it the vessel of nature, also the fire of nature. Flammel, Artifius, Lolly, and all the rest have kept the same method. It is plain, therefore, that they would have something hidden from the eyes of the vulgar. But I in good truth say that these three are but one, for nature is but one. The adept sons of art do know, and will witness this, for the fire is, to the excruciating of bodies, more than fire. Therefore it is called burning wine and a most strong fire. Hence the philosopher, burn our brass in most strong fire, which, whilst sophisters hear, they are deceived, thinking it to be a fire of coals or flame, which is contrary to our fire. Concerning this John Macungus speak. no artificial fire can infuse so great a heat as that which comes from heaven. The first gate, concerning philosophical calcination, not printed in the Dutch edition. Calcination purgeth our stone, restores natural heat, destroys nothing of the radical humidity, and brings a due solution to the stone. The caution is that it may be done philosophically, not vulgarly with salts or sulphur variously prepared, Alchemy. Whoever therefore truly desires to calcine should desist from this work till they understand our calcination better, for that every calcination destroys bodies, destroying the humidity of the stone. We also do reprobate all dry calces, for that we increase the radical humidity by calcining, but diminish none. In calcination we join nature to its nature, for that like loves like. If any one denies this, he will not be worthy of the name of a philosopher, nor ever will get any benefit from our writings, for he understands them not. Therefore apply thou nature to nature, as reason requires, seeing all things have this from nature, that like begets its like. Man is begot by a man, a lion by a lion, so let everything be calcined first in its proper nature. Learn this, and never doubt to be benefited by it. Therefore we make calces unctuous, both white and red, which are not perfected but by 3 degrees, they are fluid like wax. Other ways to be rejected, nor are perfected, but in a year to tinge without a fucus. But thou must take care in the first place concerning the weight, for it is possible for thee to doubt in this. Lest therefore thou shouldest loose thy labour, let the body be calcined with mercury, made so subtile, in which there is 1 part of the solar quality, 2 of the lunar, until the whole flow together like a liquid wax. Afterwards increase the solar quality in mercury, that there may be 4 parts of him, 2 lunar, so that thou shalt begin the work at the figure of the Trinity. 3 parts of body, 3 of spirit, and to complete the unity, let there be 1 part more of the spiritual than the corporeal substance. This is proved by the testimony of Raymond. If any one seek the proportion there, the doctor hath demonstrated to me the same. But Bacon hath taken 3 parts of the spirit to 1 of the body. I did not sleep of many nights. But choose which way thou wilt. Finis.